the Fermi paradox, as well as maybe some of the conspiracies that now in this time seems to possibly apply to the current events and news regarding all these subjects, as well as the implications and the connections to those subjects, because this all ups the ante. But because of the question, are we alone? Is there life out there in the cosmos? And did life as we know it come from Mars? All comes forth in this discussion, and any other surprises that only Seth Shostak can bring forth to the light regards to our favorite subject, and encourage us all to think of the possibilities that he can help encourage us all to explore. After all, he is the main man for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, aka SETI. And this is the time I like to tell you all, as the listeners of this show, and which you all can appreciate when I say this, pack 'em and smoke 'em, as you're going to need 'em. But that being said, let us all look into some news. And there is also a lot of news, I got to say, but I am only going to be able to focus on a few. I will try to fill up the time we have, as our guest is only on with us for 2 hours tonight. So we will take advantage of the first hour to get into as much relevant news to listeners to this show that the listeners to this show has been following and could appreciate. So starting with this one, it so happens that this first article is in fact written by our guest tonight, Seth Shostak. But the interesting is that the article was published on November 11th of 2015. And that is also the day my mom died, but back in 2005. But anyway, I decided to use this article of his as it is relevant to where tonight's show is going to go. It is titled, Senior SETI Scientist Believes That You Might Be a Martian. And Seth Shostak, the senior researcher for SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and a leading astronomer, says that life on Earth derives from life on Mars. Now, that's very implicating and very telling, again, especially in light of tonight's show. But he writes, it's possible that billions of years ago, tiny bits of biology quit the red planet and infected ours. If so, your family tree and that of every other terrestrial life form has its deepest roots, not in the ancient oceans of Earth, but in the vanished seas of Mars. Panspermia is a theory suggesting life on Earth was generated from microorganisms coming not necessarily from other planets, but from outer space. And Shostak reminds us that the idea is very old, but no scientist or astronomer could ever completely rule it out even today. In essence, they can't prove it wrong. And again, the scientists and astronauts here on Earth could surely appreciate. But some have even brought up the idea that microorganisms would be strong enough to travel through space and arrived here being carried by different forces along the cosmos. Think about that. But Shostak disagrees with that notion and says that no living organism could survive out there. He believes it would be much easier to make the journey if the organisms were buried inside sediments, meaning rocks. After all, space is hardly benign. Cosmic rays, extreme temperatures, and prolonged desiccation will relentlessly corrode any biology that takes too much time en route. But being inside a rock helps. Yes, in other words, coming here with protective shelter. I think that's what that sums it up to. But this theory is deriving from the one explained earlier, is called lithopanspermia. Shostak says that if microorganisms somehow survive space travel, they couldn't have done so for a very long period of time. So they're likely to be from Mars, which is the closest planet to ours. And he also points out that not long after the Big Bang, there was a period when the Earth was constantly showered with debris coming from Mars. Well, I got to say, that's a big difference, though, of timing after the Big Bang to when that would have happened. But okay, it still tells the truth in a big, wide picture sense. But although most took longer, a few of these rocks arrived here in just around a year. His opinion is that there could be living organisms tough enough to endure that amount of time in space. And I say even longer, especially with what has been found even here on Earth, for instance, that lay in dormant for hundreds and potential thousands of years, or even millions. But anyway, astrobiologists have identified terrestrial bacteria able to zone out in spore form for 1 million years. See, if you eventually put them in contact with water, they'll come back to life like sea monkeys. And how fitting for tonight's show when we talk about Dr. Gil Levin. But anyway, in 2013, a biochemist and professor from the Westminster Institute for Science and Technology called Stephen Banner released a paper on the theory that life here on Earth came from Mars. He claims to have found the proof that the red planet had a safe enough environment to host life sometime long ago. Now, remember this, many of the mainstream NASA scientists and scholastic scientists and teachings teach this and are in agreement with that. But Scientific American responded, the new argument, in a nutshell, is that the young Mars had a more oxygen-rich atmosphere than the Earth did 4 billion years ago and was drier. This would have resulted in a different mineralogical surface environment, one that could have provided a catalyst for the assembly of key RNA molecules and all the biotic chemistry leading to life as we know it. Now think of that, people. But anyway, back to the article. Subsequent asteroid impacts on Mars would have spewed chunks of rocks into space, carrying life presumably in microbial form through the solar system and onto the surface of a youthful Earth. And I will add to any other potential planets and or moons in our solar system as well. But did they in fact panspermiaize them all? Or is Dr. Gil Levin right that just proves that life is universal? But scientists from the University of Sheffield believe that humankind is already in possession of a multitude of such organisms and say more of them keep coming to our planet, but we just haven't been interested. At least not in the microscopic forms, I will add. Wink, wink. Listeners to this show will appreciate. But the article continues that the evidence points towards theories that complex living organisms are falling from the skies to Earth, pun intended. But Professor Milton Wainwright declared last year for the Daily Express, there is growing evidence that says this DNA comes from space and it is carried into our atmosphere on micrometeorites before dissipating. Lee Spiegel also told the Huffington Post that I am absolutely convinced that life is not restricted to planet Earth because I have found the remains of life forms that are absolutely, conclusively extraterrestrial. And guess what, he says? The organisms he's referring to, of course, came from Mars. So returning to Seth Shostak, he then added at that time that as intriguing as it is, panspermia doesn't offer any clues about life's origins. Indeed, it only seems to push the problem of biology's beginnings to another planet. And I will add, I guess he's trying to say, in sense, from one source to another, whether it be a planet or being, again, trapped in space, being delivered to this planet or any other planet. But he continues, but there's this. If life can spread, then countless worlds could be encrusted with biology, even if generating it in the first place is difficult or highly improbable. I agree with them. Now, next time something, no matter how small, falls on your shoulder, remember, it could be a Martian, he adds. And I'm going to add, or even a mad Martian, eh? And some now see a mad Martians poking their shoulders. But now let us jump back ahead in time to now. Well, I guess this is some good news to all, at least. As an article published on Space.com by Nola Taylor read, Space.com contributor on July 12 stated, massive Mars dust storm won't stop NASA's next lander. Oh, indeed. This global dust storm currently raging on Mars shouldn't disrupt the touchdown of NASA's InSight lander this fall, agency officials said. I believe it's supposed to land on November 26th, but the planet encircling storm is expected to subside by the time InSight arrives in November. But it won't be a disaster for the new lander if the storm still swirls or if another one takes its place, the officials said. Rob Grover, leader of the InSight Sentry Descent and Landing team at NASA's JPL in Pasadena, California, told Space.com. Even if the storm subsides as expected, a dusty haze will likely still hang in the Martian atmosphere when InSight arrives, said Richard Zurich, chief scientist of the Mars Program Office at JPL. That haze could affect how InSight science instruments function because it will prevent some sunlight from reaching the solar-powered lander, but touchdown should be fine, Zurich added. So therefore, it's not a shock. Martian dust storms can pop up suddenly and last for weeks or even months. The current tempest contains several smaller active dust storms and appears to have been triggered by a single local storm first observed at the end of May. Again, I got to allude you all to that movie, 2035, Origin Unknown. as well as the movie Mission to Mars. But previous NASA Mars missions have dealt with such storms, or at least observed them up close. When NASA's Mariner 9 spacecraft reached Mars in November of 1971, for example, it caught sight of a global dust storm that had been raging for several weeks. This was the second major storm of the year, researchers knew, because they had observed the first from Earth before the spacecraft's red planet arrival. The Mariner 9 storm was huge and dramatic. It covered the entire Martian surface in dust, except the peaks of the tallest volcanoes, which is there on the Tharsis Bulge, and which also has some gravitic anomalies now, mind you, Jeffrey Boy Jr. But another major dust storm, comparable in size to the current one, raged across Mars when NASA's Viking mission arrived in 1976. Yeah, no kidding. And that, too, was the second global storm that year. And I got to tell you also, that helped bring the atmosphere temperature up as well on the ground. Now, keep that in mind as we progress throughout this show. Landing in a storm. If the storm lasts for its maximum estimated duration, it should fall out just before InSight arrives, NASA officials have said, but it will likely leave traces in the red planet's air regardless. As already stated. From an entry, descent, and landing, EDL, point of view, the biggest impact of the storm will be the way the air is distributed in the Martian atmosphere, Grover said. During storms, dust heats the upper atmosphere while the shaded lower atmosphere gets cooler. From the beginning of the InSight project, atmospheric modelers have provided a range of conditions that the lander might fly through during its critical EDL sequence, including dust storms, Grover said. InSight will deploy a big parachute to slow down in the Martian atmosphere, then wrap up its descent by firing retro rockets when it's close to the ground. A dusty atmosphere might require the parachute to be deployed as much as 0.9 miles lower than it would be in clear skies, Grover said. And that would have about 20 seconds off the 6.5-minute entry to landing timeline, he added. Okay, so it might make them, sweat a little bit, but I'm confident it'll still work. And the article continues, when the parachute deploys, the suddenly slowed spacecraft will jerk backward, feeling what Grover called a snatch force. The goal is to keep the force under 15,000 pounds, he said. The amount of force is related to atmospheric density, which changes during or after a dust storm. But again, I'm confident it'll work. We mastered that. And we could tune how we're actually going to fly on landing day, Grover said. Minor changes could be sent to the spacecraft as soon as 2 hours before the landing, allowing the team to make adjustments based on the weather closer to the planet. InSight also boasts an extra 0.2 inches of thermal protection on its heat shield because the dust-thickened atmosphere generates more heat than clear skies do. Like previous NASA Mars missions, InSight, which launched in early May, will use radar to assist with its landing. 10 minutes before it enters the atmosphere, the spacecraft will link with Earth to update its position and velocity based on radar observations as it plunges into the likely dusty Martian atmosphere. InSight will rely on an internal measurement unit, an IMU, which uses an accelerometer and gyros to figure out the craft's position as it flies through the atmosphere. The radar will then provide critical updates on the spacecraft's altitude so that the lander knows where it is in relation to the ground. And we can't land successfully without that radar, Grover says. The radar is capable of seeing through the dust, allowing the mission to land safely even in a storm, he stressed. Things will be different, by the way, for NASA's Mars 2020 rover mission, which will rely on terrain relative navigation. Mars 2020 will use a camera to create a map of the landing site, comparing the landmarks in the image to those found on the craft's onboard map. This new technology will allow the spacecraft to shift its direction to avoid landing on dangerous objects. Grover said that a dust storm would impede the device, making a safe landing a challenge. But unlike InSight, Mars 2020 won't arrive during dust storm season. On the ground, InSight, the stationary lander, will help researchers map out the red planet's interior by precisely measuring heat flow and analyzing tiny Mars quakes. And the listeners to this show could appreciate are also listening for the subsurface illegals. But anyway, dust could affect InSight's scientific work because the lander relies on solar panels to power its instruments. Again, I guess they didn't make it have bees' wings to flap or bring any type of compressed air and or water to spray or blow on the solar-powered wings, to self-fix that problem. Billions of dollars, they can't figure that out yet. But anyway, a new dust storm could affect the deployment of instruments from this solar-powered platform, Zurich said. The dust could also cover the panels after the instruments have been deployed, just like it's been doing at the other rovers. That's the main worry, that the dust storm is going to cover your solar panels, said Matt Siegler, a research scientist at the Planetary Science Institute in Arizona, who works on InSight's heat probe instrument. Well, he should have worked on the flapping wings with compressed air and or water spray to clean off the wings of the solar panels. But anyway, the problem is smaller to the one NASA's solar-powered Opportunity rover currently faces. Need I digress? But the nearly 15-year-old Opportunity has hunkered down during the global storm, likely entering a low-power fault mode in which all subsystems other than the mission clock turn off. The mission clock is programmed to wake the computer to check its power levels periodically. But the massive dust storm has blotted out the sun, keeping Opportunity from charging its batteries. The batteries don't just run the instruments, they also keep the rover warm during the cold Martian nights. Without such heat, big problems can arise. And I will say maybe that's when the subsurface illegals might pop up that time or two. Hey, it's a considerable theory, but some solder joint will get too cold and split, and then your computer dies, Siegler said. Well, you should have worked out a prevention for that. But the dust storm itself could help Opportunity warm because dust can trap heat close to the planet's surface, you see. Indeed, calculations by the Opportunity team suggest that temperatures won't get cold enough in the immediate future to freeze that rover out, NASA officials said last month. When InSight lands, it should have enough power to keep its instruments warm for quite some time, Zurich said. Once the storm passes and the skies clear somewhat, the spacecraft will be able to begin its mission exploring the Martian interior. Again, looking for the subsurface illegals listeners to this show will appreciate. But in the meantime, scientists will keep their eyes on the enormous weather event, as well they should. And I say they should also look for some type of infrared signatures through those storms of what the camera eye cannot see to see if any of the subsurface illegals are moving around. But then again, maybe that's what the reconnaissance orbiter is doing, reconnaissancing for the powers that be, for the classified aspects to the mission. Again, listeners to this show could appreciate, I add. But the current storm is still developing, and atmospheric scientists here at JPL are continuing to observe it. Now, from Popular Science, July 8th, by John Wenz, stated, to find life on Mars, we'll need new orbiters, more advanced rovers, and also humans. Gee, I'm glad they're starting to include us humans on this turtle pace to get to Mars and figure out there's life on Mars once and for all, or at least to colonize it. It is also subtitled, this article, get this, there's a good reason NASA hasn't said they found life on Mars. It's beyond their current capabilities. Is it? Is it beyond their current capabilities? Or has it already been capable and utilized and discovered and validated and vindicated and replicated back on the Viking landers in 1976 with Dr. Gil Levin's controlled label release light detection tests? It's funny how that gets ignored. But it's a constant cycle, the article continues. NASA puts out a press release saying new Mars news is forthcoming in a press conference. Then the ultimate announcement is tantalizing, but far from the discovery of actual life on actual Mars. Right, it's always a discovery of a potential of a sign for life. Again, alluding back to who they not like to include from the findings of the controlled label release experiments of Dr. Gil Levin, again, validated, vindicated, replicated on two spots 4,000 miles apart from each other, the exact findings that life was detected. Again, we'll get into this soon. But this played out recently with the announcement last month of the discovery of ancient organics found on the surface and fluctuations of methane in the atmosphere of Mars, thanks to the Curiosity rover. We covered that on this show, listeners can appreciate. And methane is often produced through biological processes. Yes, like bullshit. So seasonal releases on Mars could be a sign that something is constantly replenishing an underground supply of that hydrocarbon. Yes, the subsurface illegals, I will say, or the life, the subsurface life, making it only possible to think of Dr. Gil Levin's controlled labeled release experiments as a success back then. And yes, that it's life. It's proving that life is pooping out those methane gases, just as it did in the chambers of the Viking lander that NASA ordered Dr. Gil Levin not to allow him to tell us all he detected and discovered life, but instead be forced to make to tell the public that instead he found signs of life. Again, just like what they've been going through all these years and all their big announcements, only about signs of life, never the mission of finding life. But yet again, life wasn't found on Mars through that Curiosity announcement. I digress. And NASA won't be announcing the discovery of life on Mars anytime soon. Really? Well, listeners to this show can appreciate, and you all out there may come to see that quite differently by the time the Dr. Gil Levin's Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign is fully utilized with the White House petition to make sure by your signatures that they put those Dr. Gil Levin's controlled label release life detection tests on board the next Martian rovers of 2020 that was hinted about earlier, as well as ESA's ExoMars rover as well, since both of them have denied Dr. Gil the ability and capability to put those on board those craft, let alone any other craft for the past 40 years since 1976, vindication, validations, and replication of discovery of life on Mars. They blackballed them. So we'll see what NASA will be announcing or not about the discovery of life on Mars anytime soon, won't we? Anyway, the article continues. It's not disinterest on the agency's part. Really? Asked Dr. Gil. Instead, it's because of a simple fact. None of these missions had the capabilities to directly detect life, past or present. Again, bullshit! Now the subject of life on Mars. It's a bright, hot June day at the Interplanetary Festival in Santa Fe. Los Alamos National Lab is out vaporizing rocks for passers-by. On the stage, Nina Lanza, staff scientist at Los Alamos, is talking Mars. There is methane currently in the atmosphere of Mars, she says. And it's not just there constantly. It's little puffs, little farts, I'll add, that appear to be seasonal. Right, just like here on Earth. When it gets warmer, it gets more active. When it gets colder, goes into hibernation. But methane on Earth, she says, comes from volcanoes and life. Methane doesn't last long. It lasts on the order of 100 years. So when we see methane on Mars, we know that something is making it now. Really, especially when there has not been detected any Mars quakes of any kind by any rover, by any lander, by any orbiter, or any volcanism evidences. So that narrows it down. Remember, she says it gets replenished less than 10 years. So we know that something is making it now, using her own words. Don't say you heard it from me that there's life on Mars, she says. We're still working that out. Oh, are you? But you're gonna. But it's an important observation for us to track down because of its implications, Lanza says. Of course it is, I add. Lanza is part of the team behind the ChemCam of the Curiosity rover, currently exploring the ancient lake bed of Gale Crater. Again, Mount Sharp, the pyramid within a circle, get it? But there are two components to the system, a laser and a spectrometer. The laser vaporizes rock samples, while the spectrometer looks for the telltale traces of certain elements in the vaporized remains. We could actually see the constituent atoms of the molecules, so we could see, is there carbon here? water? Is there hydrogen? Is there phosphorus? Is there nitrogen? We can see all these things, she told Popular Science after her panel. She has a handy acronym for it, CHINOPS, or rather pronounced chin-ups. Yeah, they need a lot more of them. Grow some balls. Or carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Each of these elements have a hand in life on Earth. But ChemCam can't see how each of these individual elements interact to form molecules. Oh, so it can see hydrogen and see carbon, but can't tell if the two are paired together or not. In essence, if there are signs of life or not. Boy, what was the lacking experiment that would have helped them all together with that, finding out what they are? Anyway, that also means that the ChemCam can only look for the most basic ingredients of life. It can't confirm whether life exists or existed on Mars, even though the environment surrounding Curiosity would have been perfect for life at one point in time. Yeah, and I will say Cydonia would be too, but they keep steering away from that land of the nasties. Remember, they were supposed to land the Viking landers there, but someone literally said, no, there's too many nasties there, and then they landed not too far away from Cydonia. So that's not a coincidence. That's also historical of how this connects. Whether they want to acknowledge it or not, that's not their problem too. We understand. We're not stupid. But the article continues. Gale Crater is an environment that was absolutely habitable. We just don't know if it was inhabited. Well, again, I digressed to Cydonia. It looks like it was inhabited. So again, we just don't know if it was inhabited, Lanza says. It's unlikely, though not impossible, that there's anything today. But there might have been in the distant past. Well, again, Dr. Gil Levin's proposals for the controlled label release, light detection experiments, you people denied to allow to be put on board Curiosity or any other rover or lander since 1976. So please, I hate how they spin this in these media things. And they never mention that fact of Dr. Gill in those experiments. They keep saying that they just don't have the means or the technology to detect that life. Again, it's complete bull. But luckily, NASA's capabilities on the planet are about to expand. Are they? After many years and many missions and many more billions of dollars at the slow turtle pace next speed? The Mars 2020 rover will get an all-new, souped-up version of the ChemCam called SuperCam. Yeah? Well, with Dr. Gil Levin's Martian Revelation Life Detection Campaign, it may be getting a nice, new, boosted, souped-up version. Experiment called the Dr. Gil Levin's Control Label Release Light Detection Experiments as well. We'll talk about that soon. But the article continues, while ChemCam can pick up elements, SuperCam will be able to pick up the key traces of molecules in its ultimate landing site. Great. And then it should be able to hone in on the chambers of Dr. Gil Levin's controlled labels release experiments to see the bugs fart out the gases and show to us all back on Earth real time that it's life, not chemical. And they'll kill that life, the show is life, and then therefore it cannot be chemical. Therefore, there goes your false signature theory that you guys, NASA, were never even able to duplicate on Earth just once. Again, I allude to Dr. Gil Levin. His words. Anyway, using the laser, that means that it will be able to identify more complex organics rather than individual elements. Using the laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, the LIBS, it will be able to get cursory information about rocks it hasn't even vaporized yet. Oh, but get this, people. It will have a microphone. How many years have I been saying that they needed to put microphones on these probes? That's not a new idea, and if anything, I'll declare plagiarism for my ideas back in 2003 and 2004. Who you bull? Anyway, not only are we going to listen to the Martians, Lanza jokes, yeah, but is it a joke? Remember the subsurface illegals. But you can actually get information about the target by the sounds the LIBS shockwaves makes. Yes, ting, 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 ting. Give me a break. I'd rather hear the winds. I'd rather hear the distant stillness of the winds and the noises of the eerie sounds we would hear. I'd rather hear the rocks crawl. But when you shoot the laser, it actually does make a version pew, pew, pew sound. It makes a snapping sound. And that sound changes based on what the material is and if you're penetrating through a rock coating. That's actually going to allow us to interpret our data even better, she says. Oh, I bet it will, to see if it's pinging off metallic coating of a rock. I bet and that's what they're going to find as well. But NASA isn't alone in its pursuit of biology beyond our planet. Really? ESA and Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, have also teamed up on the ExoMars mission. Again, we want Dr. Gil Levin's Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign to order the presidents and enable ESA to encourage them to put his controlled labeled release life detection experiments on board both of those rovers before they launch in 2020. But anyway, the article continues. Half of it has already arrived at Mars, though the Schiaparelli lander failed. The other half is set for a July 2020 launch. This rover will actually dig down into the Martian surface, scoop up samples, and test them for evidence of advanced organics, stopping just short of confirming past life, but taking bigger steps than ever before. Again, more bullshit. How about adding Dr. Gill's controlled label release light detection experiments and answer the question for us all? Remember, we're going to be signing a petition for them to do just that. We the people demand it. Anyway, the Mars 2020 will scoop up Martian surface samples, but it will store those on board for future retrieval, which we discussed last week on this show. Again, more turtle pace speed. Not fast enough to win the space race. Nice try. But NASA's future's past on Mars, past the 2020 rover, is unclear. You see? Not a clue. But NASA has a target of putting humans on Mars by the 2030s. Not good enough for me, not good for Elon Musk, and not good for my President Doug Trump, nor the chairman of the National Space Council, Vice President Pence, that said...
And here from this bridge to space, our nation, we will put American boots on the face of Mars.
In a much quicker time scale. Sorry, NASA, but once human boots are on the ground, hint, hint, confirmation of past or present life could come much more swiftly, as Lanza says. Turtle pace speed. But I'm still a better geologist than Curiosity. Humans could operate a microscope or a lab and complete more advanced experiments than the rovers, which are currently limited in scope by their A6 to 24 light-minute communication delay with Earth. There is, of course, another component to Mars missions, though, beyond rovers, landers, and theoretical human explorers. Theoretical? And that's the orbiter, the eye in the sky. Yeah? Well, before we get to that eye in the sky, I say let's get to the microscopic eye inside the box of Dr. Gil Levin's controlled labor release light detection experiments aboard the Mars 2020 and ExoMars rover. That would be the best test, microscopically, to then send those 6 to 24 light-minute communiques back with the Earth of those findings and visuals proving to us all, not just based upon your words this time. We the people demand more of a part and more of a visual and more a hand, pun intended, in these future missions. And we're going to get it because the listeners to this show can appreciate and many others demand it and want it and find it as high time beyond the capability of what we've had for all these many years to have answered by now. Is there life on Mars? According to Dr. Gil Levin, who you blackballed, yes, life has been detected on Mars, and we the people believe it, and we want those tests replicated, whether you like it or not. So back to the eye in the sky. While Curiosity may have dug into evidence of an ancient lake on the surface, much of the heavy lifting of finding water on Mars over and over and over has been up to a fleet of a few orbiters. A rover may be only to explore a tiny fraction of Mars in their lifetime. Hey, blame the engineers and designers and NASA's turtle pace speed for that, not the people actually creating that ideas. Remember, it's the policy and those in the control who make it the way they go. But orbiters could give a comprehensive global view every day. Right now, there are a few Mars orbiters orbiting Mars, but two of them do the most visual recon work: NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and ESA's Mars Express. The Odyssey has been taking a crap. It's been starting to go and get jiggy with it and its data. And also, they've not been very forthcoming or caring to really care about the quality and its max resolution capability. It denies us. And I'm really sick of it and pisses me off. But anyway, that's only our money up there floating around. Who cares? Not them. But with something like MRO, we cannot see anything smaller than the rovers on the surface, really, with the resolution of the cameras we have. Tanya Harrison, the director of research at ASU's New Space Initiative, says in a Twitter post. So if there were alien cars or alien buildings on the surface of Mars, we definitely would have seen them by now. And I will say, stop lying to your policy-driven drivel. We know you found it. They didn't use cars and roads like we do, but we found it in giant pyramid faces of Mars, alluding to the one that stares up at you every day. Its eye following you in the sky of the region of Cydonia. Notice how they don't tell you that also, which was also discovered in 1976. Again, a major year, a bicentennial, when NASA did not like the results of their own findings, and they want to keep it secret. But both Mars Express and the MRO are more than 15 years old. A new orbiter with better capabilities could be able to make out more details about the methane plumes and maybe even see them directly. The HiRISE instrument, MRO's eye in the sky, isn't sensitive enough to pinpoint the methane's origin, which goes to microscopic. For that, there would have to be a lot of more methane getting released into the Martian atmosphere. Yeah, there's a lot of bull going on. Am I saying anything that's wrong, that or even that mainstream scientists would in fact disagree with that assessment? We're free thinkers here on this show, and we're going to think freely, and we're going to act freely to make you do what we need to have done beyond what you want us to have done on your turtle pace speed schedule. It ain't going to happen that way, not if I have something to do about it. But MRO isn't equipped to detect methane, but Mars Express has an instrument that will be able to detect it spectroscopically, Harrison says. To see it visually, the methane would have to be venting out at a level akin to fumaroles here on Earth. Think like the plumes you see at the geysers or hot springs in Yellowstone or Iceland. The old faithfuls of the world. But we haven't detected any of those on Mars, huh? So if it's not that, that's replenishing the surface and the atmosphere with methane again. It only narrows it down to bull. One idea for a mission treats Mars exploration like a game of catch, which we discussed last week on this show. Smart but stupid. A lander or rover would scoop up samples and launch them to orbit on a tiny rocket. The orbiter will then retrieve and store those canisters of Mars for an eventual return to Earth. The key word here is eventual. Time-consuming. Turtleneck pace speed. Sorry. We're going to break your policy. And this theoretical orbiter could provide an interesting opportunity to confirm life on Mars as never before with direct sampling. Again, so would Dr. Gil Levin's controlled label release life detection tests aboard the Mars 2020 and the ExoMars rover. Stop us all. Using an electron microscope, you could actually see structures that look like microbes. But we don't have that on Mars, Lanza says. Why? Because of NASA policy and validation of Dr. Gil Levin. That's why. We have micro-imagers, but they're not as high resolution. We could say there's mineralogy, there's chemistry, there's organic molecules. You could build a very good circumstantial story. And I think it's reasonable. For what, Lanza? To create a circumstantial story that's reasonable instead of getting the hard facts of science by replication? Who are you touting for? Certainly that's not your free-thinking brain speaking. But anyway, for an extraordinary claim, you require extraordinary evidence. Until that happens, don't believe the hype. Indeed, thank you for the disclosure. Don't believe their hype. Believe the truth. Believe the science. Believe the replication of the Dr. Gil Levin's control label release and life detection experiments, believe in the hype and the truth of the Dr. Gil Levin's Martian revelation life validation campaign. But anyway, this which now brings us all to July 11th, Space.com article by Chelsea Goad, Space.com staff writer, that stated that NASA may have discovered and then destroyed organics on Mars in 1976. Look how things are falling together. Over 40 years ago, a NASA mission may have accidentally destroyed what would have been the first discovery of organic molecules on Mars, according to a report from the New Scientist. Recently, NASA caused quite a commotion when it announced that its Curiosity rover discovered organic molecules, which made up life as we know it on Mars. This followed the first confirmation of organic molecules on Mars in 2014. But because small carbon-rich meteorites so frequently pelt the red planet, scientists have suspected for decades that organics exist on Mars. Really? Have they? But researchers were stunned in 1976 when NASA sent 2 Viking landers to Mars to search for organics for the first time and found absolutely none. Again, complete bull! You know, I'm sorry here, but I'm not sorry. I'm yelling because it pisses me off, and it doesn't just piss me off. It's blackballing and pisses off Dr. Gil Levin, whose experiments did prove that it found organics. It proved that organics was life, and it proved that it could kill life, stopping the farting methane as it was. It wasn't an accident that the organics were destroyed. It was a purposed experiment to prove that the life they had proven they had found, well, if it could be killed, it's life. Therefore, there would be no more signatures from the gases, irradiated gases in those chambers, which was first done that detected it. And then once they turned up the heat, they killed it, they shot it with the radiated juice again, nothing. So that's why we need the replication test. NASA is lying here, and they're still blackballing Dr. Gil, and because they will be made to look and feel embarrassed. In other words, they're trying to cover their asses here from the truth and from you, and to follow, like Lanza says, to continue to follow their circumstantial story that they want you to think is reasonable. This is not about circumstantial evidence. This is not about circumstantial facts and stories. This is about science fact, and we the people demand to get that fact because we the people paid for it. What do you think of that? Grow some balls. Sign the petition when it comes out. But anyway, let me continue to read this bull. Scientists didn't know what to make of the Viking findings. Oh, did they not? How could there be no organics on Mars? It was just completely unexpected and inconsistent with what we knew. Chris McKay, a planetary scientist at NASA's AIM Research Center, told New Scientist. Of course, it was completely unexpected, but yet you sent the detection test expecting to find life. No, you sent it because you scammed the American people like you've been doing all these years since, because you didn't expect to find it there. That's why you guys were, it was completely unexpected and inconsistent with what you knew. It totally blew you all away. Just like looking down and seeing that face in the eye follow you as you traversed over the skies. It was going to land the Viking lander there, but said, no, there's too many nasties there. Let's move away. You ain't bull hitting me or anyone else. Anyway, the article continues. A possible explanation arose when NASA's Phoenix lander found percolate on Mars in 2008. This is a salt used to make fireworks on Earth. We talked about that last show, but that part is a new twist to that. I didn't know it was used to make fireworks. That's cool. But so does sulfur. It becomes highly explosive under high temperatures. And while the surface of Mars isn't too warm, the main instrument aboard the Viking landers, the gas chromatograph, mass spectrometer, had to heat the Martian soil samples to find organic molecules. No, it was to kill the organic molecules of what was found from the Dr. Gil Levin's controlled labor release experiments, which then had to be ordered to be heated. Again, I'll explain it again. Like Dr. Gill said, then had to be heated to see if it's life, it would be killed. They flood it with the juice again, see if the bugs would eat it and fart out its gas. Nothing. They killed the life. Therefore, it proved they detected life. It was not a chemical reaction. But anyway, and because the percolate is in the soil, the instrument would have burned up any organics in the samples during the process. Again, you're telling the half-truth. You're still hitting everybody. You're leaving out and blackballing Dr. Gill. The discovery of percolate reignited scientists' convictions that the Viking landers could have found organics on Mars. Gee, you think? You get some new insight, pun intended, and you realize that everything you thought was wrong, McKay said. Yes, you went there expecting Mars was dead. You guys got pissed off and realized how wrong you were once your Viking orbiter looked down and seen the nasties of the face of Sidonia's eye following you across the sky, making you want to land away from the nasties and land down where, in fact, it detected life that you guys are blackballing and lying to us all about. However, the article continues, finding percolate didn't provide concrete proof that the Viking landers found and accidentally destroyed organic molecules, so the investigation continued. Again, what liars? Again, blackballing the truth, because then they'd have to admit Dr. Gill was right. He'll be validated and vindicated, which he will be, by you all signing the petition for the Dr. Gill Levin's Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign. NASA, you got egg on your face. You're gonna admit whether you like it or not. You're gonna put those experiments on whether you like it or not, because we got our President Doug Trump and the National Space Council Chairman, Vice President Pence, who want also to create something here and have said that some things are gonna happen. And in order for that to happen, we need this to happen. So I'm sure we will have their support on that. Since the people support it, we want it answered once and for all. We don't trust you, NASA, anymore. Anyway, the article continues. In a new study published in June in the Journal of Geophysical Research, Planets, Melissa Guzman of the Latmos Research Center in France, McKay and a handful of collaborators revisited the Viking lander data to see if anything was missed. Yes, Dr. Gillivan. Again, this is their political agenda spin story. Remember that. And this team found that the Viking landers also detected chlorobenzene, which the researchers said could have formed from burning organic material in the soil samples. Or it could also be all over the place on Mars because it gets burnt by the radiation of the ultraviolet. Again, you're thinking we're stupid. And I'm not a scientist, but I'm at least following this crap. Pun intended. Still, this is not proof that the Viking landers found organic molecules and then accidentally burned them. It was not an accident. It was part of the controlled experiments to detect that life that was detected. If it was life, it would be able to be killed. They had to kill it. You get it? Stop lying. Even the scientists who completed this investigation are divided. Yeah? According to Dr. Gil Levin, and he's got a group of scientists we're going to get in the next coming days and weeks who are also in their beliefs of Dr. Gill's experiments had detected life. It's just you guys are blackballing them politically and outwardly and in the mainstream. Again, you're not hitting us. Guzman said she still isn't completely convinced that the chlorobenzene they detected formed when organics in Martian soil were burned. Smart lady. She said that the molecule could have come from Earth aboard NASA equipment. Dumb lady. Okay, it could have already been there as well. It's universal. Dr. Gill's test proved that all this is universal. Genesis did not happen just upon the Earth. And like Dr. Gill said, that in itself would be the most incredible discovery of humanity. And it would be. But despite the skepticism, others are convinced this paper really seals the deal. Daniel Glavin, an astrobiologist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, who is not involved in the study, told New Scientist. Oh, I guess thank you for your chime in there. Yeah, we believe you. I think we need to believe Dr. Gil Levin. I think the listeners to this show could appreciate and weigh the validations and vindications of the theories and the imaginations of the science stories of what is true and not. Dr. Gill provides hardcore, factual, scientific evidence that was replicated. What are these guys spreading? Hardcore, policy-driven, controlled mainstream science? Bull! Now, on that note, people, again, pack 'em and smoke 'em if you're going to need 'em. Remember the Dr. Gil Levin's Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign. Please click on that through www.thefacesofmars.com and read about what this campaign is about. On the campaign page, you will get to hear an interview I did with Dr. Gil Levin himself. It will play automatically as you read. And you may even be a little entertained by it. But in his own words, he described the history and the future, if and when we force them, by you all signing a White House petition that is expected to come forth June 28th, of what we're going to do and make NASA put these Dr. Gil Levin's controlled label release light detection experiments aboard both rovers of the Mars 2020 and the ExoMars rover. So again, pack 'em and smoke 'em, as we're going to need 'em as we come back with our honored guest, Mr. Seth Shostak. Stay tuned.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
On www.thefacesofmars.com. And let's introduce our guest. Seth Shostak, he is the senior astronomer at the SETI Institute in California, and he is part of the team using the large radio telescopes to search for intelligent life elsewhere. He has degrees from Princeton University and Caltech and spent 13 years at a university in the Netherlands. In addition to more than 60 papers published in refereed journals, Seth has penned 600 articles on science, technology, and photography. He's authored 4 books, including a college textbook on astrobiology. He has appeared on hundreds of TV and radio shows, including The Martian Revelation around 2003 or 2004, I believe. I think it was 2003. And he is also host of the SETI Institute's weekly 1-hour radio program, Big Picture Science. And please go to his website, www.sethshostak.com. That's www.sethshostak.com. And I got to tell you, it's an honor to have him on. It was an honor then. And it's like a blast from the past, but now it's more relevant and much more meaningful in the importance and the implications of why we have him on. And it's an honor to have you on, sir. And I believe you're on with us?
I hope so.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Seth, for being on. Wow, look, so many years it's been since 2003, 2004. A lot has happened since then, huh?
Well, it has. I mean, we've seen the world change. We've seen our understanding of the cosmos change. And when I look in the mirror, I see myself change.
Well, the age thing, all right, who could beat that? I'm going gray myself, but hopefully it's of wisdom more than the stress of life. And waiting, to get to Mars. And I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show, sir. Have you?
No, I didn't. I heard the intro music. I was at home. So okay,
gotcha. Because I brought up an article that you wrote on November 11th of 2015, the day my mom died, but in 2005, basically stating that we may be the Martians. And at the end, you are basically saying, when you turn around, something small lands on your shoulder. Don't be surprised if it was a Martian. And I added, or a mad Martian poking on some shoulders now.
That could be, but we could be Martians indeed, or at least put it this way. There's some chance that we're descended from Martian microbes. So that goes back a long time. We're descended from some microbes, that's for sure. And whether they were Martians or terrestrial, we still don't know for sure.
Well, correct. At least as many of us here that use the visual data, that would raise the ante to some of them. But again, I understand the mainstream flow. Where is your position now, though, regards to that visually on, where I'm talking about, obviously, Cydonia and the big case of all that, and the connections to the modern news and even what you were speaking about back then regarding to the microbes, the bacterias, let alone of searching for signals, which I, of course, want you to get into.
Well, as far as Cydonia goes, and I assume
as an example, not just, you know what I mean.
Well, if you're talking about evidence that there's been some intelligent critters on Mars, I don't think that evidence is very good at all, actually. So I hope that doesn't deflate your balloon there. But
not at all. Believe me.
The face on Mars. I think I bought a 5-pound bag of potatoes last week, and I looked at those potatoes. There were a few faces there, but I never thought for a moment that the potatoes were trying to get in touch with me. So
Well,
Not the face.
right. Well, whether the face is trying to get in touch with people is another factor. I'm glad that you kind of said, because that's a good implication of indeed what's going on there. But I understand your position, sir, and I respect that. And no matter, look, I'm going to be honest. There are some people who are pissed I was having you on. Others were excited. To those that were pissed, I got to say this. I like this guy. All right. He's the right guy to be in the place that he's in with the smarts. And, he's helping leading us the way to this ultimate disclosure of where all of this is going to be. But that's my opinion, sir. And please forgive me if that, I don't mean to offend you. And I'm not trying to at all. You're an honored guest. And again, I respect you. I like you. And again, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is a big issue. And whether it's visually seen or coming in through other various sources or expectancies or imaginations, I hope you could lead us on tonight on your dreams and visions from a child to even now you're in a position of what you hope to see and create in the future of what you may expect some of these SETI outlooks to be outreaching toward. But again, it's an honor to have you on. And where are you now focused regarding to the recent news, though, from Curiosity and all the hype regarding the organics being found on Mars? Do you think that's a fascinating thing now, especially at this time?
Well, of course, it's a fascinating thing. We keep finding evidence for organics on Mars, but maybe that's not terribly surprising. If you pick up a meteorite, you'll find organics in that, too. Organics just mean that there's some compounds in there that have a lot of carbon. And that doesn't mean that there was ever anything alive in those rocks, but it does mean that some of the ingredients necessary to start life are in those rocks. So, that gives you some hope that if we just keep looking around the solar system, we may find some life somewhere. But the really interesting story of a couple of weeks ago, the organics were interesting, but for me, of greater interest was the detection
the Fermi paradox?
No, methane on Mars.
Yes.
Because methane, there are only a couple of ways to make methane and have it hang around for a while, because on Mars, the sunlight will destroy it very quickly within a few centuries. And, that's pretty quick when it comes to astronomy. So,
yeah, and that lady, I forget her name, that I mentioned in the news, she said replenished in 100 years. I misspoke and said in 10 years. But that may be, too, depending on life here on Earth. A bull craps, dissipates quickly. But not that I'm saying there's a lot of bulls running around. But something is presenting us with obvious evidence of some type of process that we don't see as geological. Is that correct?
Well, not necessarily. As to say, there are two ways to make methane. One is to have bacteria that produce methane as an exhaust gas. And that's kind of the interesting case, because if that's what's going on Mars, then there's some bacteria there that are alive. In other words, underneath the sand of Mars, there could be biology. That would be interesting. But the other way to make methane is via processes that don't involve biology. For example, volcanoes make a lot of methane. Right. And there are, so it could be just water interacting with rock underneath the surface of Mars that's making the methane. So we don't know. But it would.
How would that do that?
Well, that's a chemical reaction. You got to remember your temperature.
They couldn't even duplicate that here on Earth, though. I heard when they tried to test for that. Is that true?
No, I don't think that's true. I think you can duplicate it in your chemistry lab.
Really, create methane out of well, again, I'm ignorant on that. Forgive my ignorance, sir. This is why you're here. This is the most rocking and formally science educating show there is. And it educates me as well as everyone else. And we all need to be now. And wouldn't you agree to that?
Well, definitely, I would agree to that.
But it's very important, though, because of the methane. It also is an indicator of life, a life process. And Dr. Gil Levin's controlled labeled release experiments, they've been blackballing him for years and not wanting to include that. And I'm betting, and so is he, that it would have guaranteed replicated Vikings findings, even then some, with the capabilities of the Curiosity helping break down and see what's what, and even more with the future missions. Would you agree that at least on the Mars rover 2020 and the ExoMars rover, that it would be very, very beneficial for his test to be on board, to be replicated finally?
Yeah, I think so. I think Gil Levin made some interesting comments about the capabilities of those Viking landers that plopped down onto the surface of our little ruddy buddy back in the mid 1970s. And
Ruddy buddy.
most of the members of the science team thought that it hadn't proved the existence of life. You could argue about the label release experiment and all that stuff. But the thing that I think convinced the team that there wasn't biology there was the fact they didn't find any organic compounds. All right. But it turns out that the sensitivity of the experiment wasn't the greatest. So it's an open question. And it could very well be that there's life on Mars, maybe a greater probability that there once was life on Mars. But we'll only find out by doing more experiments.
All right, so that's great. You're in agreement then that with a souped-up then version of a modern-day Dr. Gil Levin's light detection control label release experiment would be beneficial on those rovers. Because I don't know if you heard, we're making we have a campaign going on called the Dr. Gil Levin's Life Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign, and I was wondering if you would support it because I was speaking to Dr. Gil yesterday, sir, and I told him that you were going to be on. And we're going to launch this petition, a White House petition, to get the presidents to order NASA to put them on those rovers. Hey, we need 100,000 signatures. I hope to get that, right, sir? But at least it puts it on the map of the importance. It'll be nice to see what we the people could do, especially with the potential to get more than 100,000. But the thing is, I told him you were going to be on. And when he says, in conjunction with this petition going out, he would like to have you even to be on a panel with him and the other scientists that, especially right now, because of the organics being detected and found and whatnot, that now it's more feasible and acceptable to discuss about this issue seriously in a scientific manner. And would you be willing to do that, sir? I'm asking you live on the air.
Well, listen, I don't have to do it.
Correct. Right. I understand that, sir. That's why I asked if you were willing. Just for discussions, not for any finger pointing or about the serious discussions of the feasibilities of why or why not now. I'm pushing this campaign for him a little more balls out. Please forgive my French, but he deserves it. He's 94. He knows what he's talking about, and he wants to be validated and vindicated. And I think, you there amongst that panel, he's very for that, and he encourages that. And anyone else you may feel that you would like to bring to the panel along with people he has, would you be willing with something that you'd be interested in, sir? And would you be interested in signing that campaign?
Well, listen, Gary.
Let's jump that hurdle real fast.
Well, Gary, let's just look at how this actually works.
Okay.
Science isn't done by petitions. Science isn't done by the president telling NASA, you got to put this experiment on board. That's not the way it's done. Everybody in the astrobiology community, they wouldn't like anything better than to find that there was or is life on Mars.
Then we should get all their signatures. What do you listeners think out there?
What I'm trying to tell you is getting signatures is not the way it's done.
We tried the other route. So is Dr. Gil. He's been denied every time, told to go right home. They even sent this last proposal by cab to his house, not even going to go through the mail. Well, I found that odd.
Well, I find that particularly, especially odd. But look, I know many of the biologists involved with NASA and with the Mars missions, and they're all trying to find life on Mars. And it may be that repeating that experiment from 40 years ago is no longer the best way to find that evidence. Well, things have changed in the last 40 years, right? The experiments can be much more sensitive now. They can be much more definitive now than they were. So what you don't want is that, the people on the streets who are not particularly expert in the chemistry of looking for life on Mars, that they, force them to do an experiment, which is in fact the wrong experiment. That's all I'd say.
Oh, the wrong experiment. Oh,
because there are better experiments. That was
like what? Because you would probably know more, but I'm just going by what I just read from the news. For the news, she said we have no other technologies, not even a better camera system to look in, or we're working on that just to pinpoint what certain elements are: helium, calcium, phosphorus, everything. But and nothing that could actually detect life. Therefore, Dr. Gill becomes more feasible now. And this is why we, the people, want to do this. Whether it will work or not, I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, what I'm going to do for the future, for the Martian revelation, and especially regards to SETI issues, sir, I'm going to make it happen. Well, I'm going to change our fate and change our future. And that's where you come in, because you're a very crucial role and a very bright mind on how people, even now without these issues, and I've been watching you for years, sir. And I've been watching children watch you, sir. And they're looking to you as one of the spokespeople of, believe it or not, the Martian revelation. Years later now, even some of these children are listening to the show at this very moment in unbelief, but they want to believe, because I was told by them that you help them ignite their imaginations, and they wanted to hook up their computers. Remember back then? Are you guys still doing that, by the way? Using other people's computers to help look for these detections for space? I'm sorry to drive off the subject for a second, but that's interesting.
Yeah, well, Gary, I think you're referring to SETI at home,
right.
But that's not our project. That was never our project, actually. That's a project of the University of California at Berkeley. That's a different group. It's still going, though. It is very much still.
Oh, great. Again, forgive my ignorance. But again, the most rock and informally science educating show. And again, like I said, so much. I just thought they were an offshore. Discussion right now basically comes up at a time where it's really red hot, and your influence and obviously your side of the street on it would be very influential in the debate, and which would help decide with the petition. Like you said, there's ways to go about it. This is his other way of adding to it, like I think you were alluding to, which is more the way things happen. Does that sound right? Correct? More correct, sir?
Well, I have to say we had a loss of downlink there for about 2 minutes, so I missed some of it. But I don't know what caused that. But in any case, let me just simply reiterate: the people that decide what's going to go on a Mars mission, right? Again, it's not decided by vote. It's not decided by a certain small group of people. It's decided by the NASA scientists who have proposed the mission, who are qualified to say, hey, look, we're looking for evidence of life. What's the best way to do that on the basis of what we've done in the past and what the technology allows us to do today? You wouldn't put the same cameras on it now that you did in 1975. Absolutely not. You don't use the same camera today that you used in 1975. That technology has gone way beyond what it was in 1975, and the same is true for life detection experiments. So, I just think that these guys know what they're doing.
What do they have? What do they have now? Is life detection experiments? If that I forget her name, that said that in the news. What do you know? What can you inform us with that they have that's better, at least more feasible than Dr. Gill's test, even with a souped-up version for the experiment?
Yeah, you might want to soup it up. That's one thing you could do. The other thing you couldn't do in 1975 is just put a microscope on board. There was no way.
That's what I said. That's what I said to Dr. Gill when I had him on in May, sir. I said, why didn't they just also put a microscope on board to see the process?
Gary,
take pictures.
They couldn't do that. They couldn't
because images, right?
It wouldn't fit, and they couldn't operate it remotely. It simply wasn't technologically capable.
But it is now. We have that capability now.
You could do it now. Yes.
That's it. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to help Dr. Gill with. And that's all he wants is an outright discussion. Signatures help to create a fire. Whether it helps make the change or not is one thing, but it helps make it the debate to which he deserves to have. And many follow him and believe in him that he's at least right in that regard, because we do want this question answered, and on a much faster time scale, especially now we're in the new space race.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that. Everybody wants the answer. It's not limited to a small group of people, and it's certainly not limited to people outside NASA. Nothing would help NASA more than to find evidence of life on life on Mars, and life in space in general, for that matter. And by the way, just for the heck of it, I might mention that if you talk to astrobiologists today and ask them, hey, look, where would you look for life in space? If you could only look one place, if you only had one place you could look, where would it be? Would it be under the sands of Mars?
Or Europa? Or Enceladus.
A lot of people are saying Enceladus and Enceladus. You got me saying it. A lot of people would say Enceladus is their number one pick. People who have spent their careers studying Mars now think that it might be a better bet to check out Enceladus. That might or might not be true, but you should be prepared.
We need to do them all at the same time.
Well, we've
been going at a slow turtle pace speed, and it's ridiculous. And what we could have now, especially for the Space Force, Trump wants to, and which he did sign and told General Dunford, go get it. Go get what? But also Vice President Pence said he wants to put American boots on the face of Mars. Everyone's clapping, but no one gets it. They're not bringing flowers and flags. They're bringing M60s.
Well, I hope that'll defend them well on Mars.
Yeah, I agree with you, sir. I agree with you. But if we're capable of doing that, we should be able to simultaneously conduct several missions at a time, no problem, and do these tests, do these probes. And I believe you're definitely in agreement with that. That's where we should be as Americans, right?
Well, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Look, we want to find life in space. We don't have infinite amount of money. Lamentably, we can't do it all at once. That would be great, but you can't do everything at once. Somebody's got to pay for it, and the taxpayers pay for it. So, you got to justify it with them. So that means that it'll be pick and choose which missions go and which instruments are on which missions. But nobody's trying to avoid finding life in space, of course.
Well, I don't know, I gotta, I say they do, but as others, but I could see your standpoint and why. Now, if it's okay, I want to get into some questions too as we continue on. But one question is, regardless of the technology, do you have a better form of telescope or microscope for the technology, used to when you were mentioning about being put in the box? Again, people are wanting to focus in, pun intended, on that question on how it will be applied if it does any type of light detection like Dr. Gill's or any better souped up version could see. So what, is there a better form of telescope? I believe you said there was now, but I'm just trying to be fair to the asker.
Yeah, well, I think do you mean telescope or microscope? I think you mean microscope, right?
Microscope, they must mean.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's not that there's so much a better form. It's that microscopes are microscopes, and it doesn't take, a souped up electron microscope to see a microbe, a Martian microbe, presumably dead or alive, for that matter.
Eat some juice and fart out some radioactive gas.
You could always do that, but it's the problem is, can you operate a microscope 35 million miles away? That's the question. And we couldn't do that 40 years ago, but today you could probably do it.
Oh, I say definitely. I have a friend, I can't mention his name, a fellow Christian, and he goes, well, the Arecibo now and then, and he's very connected, like when MGS and Mars Observer. He was part of a team for the Deep Space Network to actually work on solve some issues and do, obviously, things he said that was classified. For not because of any reason, just because it's, classified stuff. This is what Deep Space Network is: security and speed. And that was at that time years ago when you and I were speaking, sir, of the missions going on back then. So I know you know what I'm referring to. But again, a lot has come a long way since then. God, I'm feeling old, Seth.
Well, I don't know what to suggest, but maybe more veggies. I don't know.
Well, in that sense, maybe I should just say looking old. But yeah, I eat my veggies, salads all the time. But anyway, Richard on Twitter asks, do you believe that they are hiding the existence of life on Mars by chance? And would that be preventing you from obviously being able to state the obvious in their minds?
Well, what I would do is turn that question around and ask Richard, why would they keep that quiet? What possible incentive would NASA, or for that matter, any of the other space agencies that want to send, hardware to Mars, why would they want to keep that discovery quiet?
That's the telling question for all these years. The telling question, yes, because your next part of the argument would be that NASA would get so much funding overnight if they would have announced it, right, sir?
Absolutely, they would.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen that. In 1996, the biggest science news story was the possible existence of fossilized microbes from Mars.
ALH, I forget the number.
84001.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That was front page news. The New York Times, font that I've never seen before or since. That was a big story. And, everybody was excited. The president was making announcements. NASA was going nuts. Unfortunately, it turns out that it probably wasn't for real, but, it was certainly very interesting. So the idea that NASA would cover up the existence of life on Mars is crazy. I can't think of any reason why they would do that. Some people would say, oh, the public couldn't handle the news. What do you mean? The public handled the news in 1996?
Well, that goes back to 1958 Brookings. I know you're familiar with that. I see, but again, I understand where you're going. You're right. But so now, if it was officially able to be done, do you think now, with our capabilities now, sir, we're able to do now that disclosure, if it was or not, it doesn't matter. If it's announced now, you think we're ready to adapt to that fact without killing our neighbor? They're already doing that.
Well, I asked you, Gary. Suppose you picked up the paper tomorrow and it said, scientists find microbial life on Mars. Would you murder your neighbor? Is that how you react? I doubt it.
Right, but that's what the old Brookings thought. They also made a movie at that time. I think you might have seen it, 1952 with Peter Graves, Red Planet Mars.
Well,
I mean, boy, if Brookings was, I said they must have watched that movie and based their findings off the definite, problems that they would see that would ensue, at least at that time: communism, Christianity, religious breakdown, society breakdown. People happy at first, but then pissed because the Martians have a more advanced atmosphere and we're using coal. Coal business shuts down, and the worst case scenarios of, I guess, why these issues would be. But anyway, that I digress. Even with or without that, do you think we're ready, even for take the intelligent leap to believe that the face represents what it really would be? Do you think we would be ready even for that type of, regardless microbial or that evidence? Do you think we are ready, whether it's on Mars or Enceladus or Iapetus or beyond our solar system, where Trump also wants to go?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about intelligent life, right, the kind of aliens you see in the movies and on television.
Or any intelligence for what you guys are looking for now.
Well, that's not going to be in our solar system, right? That's going to be somewhere else. That's going to be on somebody else's solar system. No matter what biology might be on Mars or was on Mars, it's not going to be very complex biology involving brains and eyeballs and anything like that. Okay, certainly not technology. If there were technology, you'd see the remains of it. We don't see that. So, you have to look somewhere else. But are we ready for it? I don't know when we're going to be ready. Were the Romans ready? I mean, I think that if they announced...
Wow, that's quite an analogy. We know what happened to them.
Yeah, but not because of the discovery of life elsewhere, right? That wasn't their problem. Nope. If you were to pick up the papers tomorrow, if you still pick up a paper, most people open up their browser, but whatever, and you saw, oh gosh, scientists have found a signal coming from 500 light years away from some sort of intelligent beings, would you say, well, that's it, I'm not going to work today, I'm just going to ride in the streets? Is that what you do? I don't think you'd do that. You'd say, tell me more. That's really interesting.
Right, and our kids would want to go, especially seeing it on the IMAX films. Neil, he's there, their kid today, their birthday, and he got home and then went to bed. I mean, he was so fascinated, not one word I was told. And I see children doing that all the time. It inspires them. But when they get ridiculed for like saying, again, the face, and when they say, I had child, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Even now, even adults, what does that look like? Oh, it looks like a face. All right, that's it. I don't even tell them what it is, where it is, because Seth, who needs to get into that with everybody, right? But me, I do now. But the point is, because the Martian revelation's upon us. But the thing is, the overall question of what this represents, I think you just hit the nail on the head, sir. I don't think we're going to want to go out and kill everybody. I think we're going to want to go, which would then fit Vice President Pence's vision and definitely work for the Space Force, wouldn't it, sir?
Well, the Space Force, I'm not sure what the Space Force is about. I mean, putting weapons into space, you either like that idea or you don't, but it doesn't have anything to do with
Well,
NASA.
the Russians and Chinese have been working on, and they're going to do it regardless. So regardless what anyone's position is, it's going to happen. Whether there's intelligent life out there, they're also looking to prevent us against, or just ourselves. But either way, we have to be prepared, especially if you believe in the likes of Stephen Hawking's commenting, especially before his death. It makes you wonder. It does make you wonder. But then that would bring into the question, I'm sure you would argue, well, then how come we haven't picked up their signals? Right?
Well, yeah, but that's a different thing. I mean,
right.
if you can worry about the Space Force simply on the basis of, do we want to start yet another arms race? That's a defense issue. But it's not a NASA issue. NASA doesn't build weaponry. It doesn't put weaponry in space. It doesn't even carry weaponry into space. So I think that the administration has this a bit confused. They had the feeling that because NASA has rockets, that it has something to do with, weaponry in space. And
well, you're right. That's why President Trump said, it's going to be another branch like the Air Force, Marines. It's not going to be NASA. It's going to be a military space force. When NASA obviously has a fundamental backbone of knowledge and experience, they will definitely utilize. And you. Because they're going to be out there needing to communicate with each other, let alone having communicate like Star Trek, ship to ship, when in the future that happens at some point, whether in our solar system or, I agree with you, beyond, it would most likely be.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much intelligence elsewhere in our solar system. Earth is it when it comes to intelligence. No matter what you may think of the intelligence on Earth.
Well, that says a lot too. But whoever this Richard is responded, and it ain't the one you're thinking, because he's doing his own thing. I call him the unmentionable on this show, sir. A lot's happened over the years. But anyway, this ain't about him. But that Richard responded, to hide the existence of aliens on the world, how can you argue the multitude of UFO encounters and reports? Maybe you would say black op military projects. I don't know. But I'm not going to speak for you, sir.
Well, what is Richard saying there? I mean, I didn't quite get it. Is he saying that
hide the existence of aliens on the world? I guess are they here? I guess he's speaking from a viewpoint of here, or maybe Mars. How can you argue the multitude of UFO encounters and reports? So he must mean this world.
Yeah. Well, I think that what Richard is saying there is what maybe 1/3 of the population would say. 1/3 of the population of the U.S. thinks the aliens are indeed here, buzzing the countryside, sailing around in their saucers. 1/3. So that's not a small number of people. It's a rather large number of people. But I would suggest to Richard or anybody who agrees with him, and I'm sure there are many who do. I know that there are many who do because I hear from them every day, actually.
Right.
Yeah. They call me up every day. They send me photos. They send me videos, whatever. But
well, I commend you, allowing that reach out. I commend you for that. And like I said, your position is your position. And I can't wait till it opens more, because I could just yet imagine what's going to come out of that mind of yours. Anthony J. on Google Plus asked, what is his definition of life on Mars, or what would he call life on Mars, since we have learned that the planet is not red, like on the TV of Ron, because thanks to Ron Levin, and does have snow and water?
The planet's not red? So wait, that's something of the last week.
The sky. I think he meant the sky.
Sky. Yeah. No, that was the way that the early photos were processed. Yeah, right. That's true. But I mean, the question was, what would the life on Mars be like? Is that what he's asking?
I think that was different. What is your definition of life on Mars, or what would you call life on Mars? Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a good question, actually, because, despite what you might have heard in the 10th grade or 9th grade, whenever you took biology, it's not very easy to define life. When you're in high school, they tell you, oh, well, life, it metabolizes and it reproduces and whatever. Okay. But, you could find other things that fit all those definitions, and they're not alive. Or you can find things that are alive that don't fit those definitions, like a mule. A mule doesn't reproduce, but I don't think you would argue that it's not alive. So it turns out that there's no good definition for what it means to be alive. So it's actually kind of hard to determine whether something's alive. If you're talking about something, you need a microscope to see. But, one thing is, if you see a whole bunch of them and they're moving around, and if you come back later and, some are gone and new ones have been made, if there's some sort of, reproduction and Darwinian evolution, that's really the thing, then you would say, okay.
Well, you'd have to believe in evolution for that one, though.
Well, you would, but if you don't, then maybe you shouldn't be designing this experiment. I'm saying.
Well, why? That don't prove evolution or creation. It proves life or no life. Like you said yourself in that article, if it's floating around in space, that means it's universal. Dr. Gill's right there, at least, whether it's on Mars or if it's coming here and protected in rocks, since it makes sense that if they're just floating around, how would they survive? But they could survive by coming in if they're embedded in some protected, and they break free once they hit a potential environment that could set them free and either revive them or thrive them. Am I right? Or I'm not mistaken, am I?
No, you're not mistaken. I mean, life could come from Mars here. Microbes could come from Mars here.
So how can we prove evolution if it's floating around in deep space and in the cosmos? You're trying to find signals from way out there to begin with. That's like finding a needle in a haystack.
Well, that may be, but what does that have to do with evolution? I'm not sure.
There you go.
I've lost the train of thought here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. All right. I'm disappointed, Gary, to hear that you don't believe in evolution. That's too bad.
No, but I do believe in science. I do believe in the processes of science. I'm not going to give exact dates of what the people want me to believe those dates may be. I mean, I'm not stupid, but if it's floating around there in the cosmos, you help me to see that. But from Jennifer on Facebook, do you have any research information concerning the bacterial life found on other planets? And do we have any idea of any planets that has been seen to have life?
Yeah, well, here's the word to Jennifer. We do not. We do not. We have at this point no conclusive evidence of any life beyond Earth. It isn't to say it isn't there, but we haven't found it yet, not in a convincing way. Gil Levin aside, I mean, his experiment didn't convince the rest of his science team. And you can say maybe he got a bad deal there, and maybe he did, but it didn't convince the rest of them. And it doesn't convince scientists today either. Most of the ones I've talked to are still very skeptical about those Viking lander results. So I think
this is why he would like you to also, even, with your input, to partake in these conversations. Would you be willing? I got to give him an answer out of respect for him and out of respect for you.
Tell him that they're better minds than mine who are working on this problem. That's what
I gotcha. All right. You're not interested. All right. So let me see if we can get to one more question, or no. You know what? Let us just go to a break, and we'll come back, because again, I want to get into Mr. Shostak's you know, things that he's accomplished since I've last talked to him, and especially where things are leading and what he's, doing lately, and where they're out looking into space and consideration of how to look for different types of intelligent design signals or anything else, or even structures, for all we know, that could communicate through solar systems or vast distances. So on that note, people, stay tuned, and we shall be back. Pack 'em and smoke 'em. You know the routine.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
.com to read about tonight's guest, Seth Shostak. And again, we're going all over the place and touching on some controversial issues with Seth. But this is nothing for him that he can't handle. Again, he says he handles it every day. And I do commend him for letting the people do that. And I can't wait for a time to when he's going to be able to really utilize his mind for us as more and more of this becomes open and enabled to be spoken about. And again, with no insults, it's Mr. Seth Shostak here of SETI.org, www.sethshostak.com. Go check that out, and there's other links, and also to his books, and which is fascinating reads as well. I've partially read one of them, but I've read, over the years, I've heard Mr. Shostak speak and seen his articles, and he also has a show. What do you do that, one day a week, sir?
It's a weekly show, yes, Gary.
Oh, excellent. Can you tell us some about that before we continue back?
Sure. It's called Big Picture Science. It's available on the web, and it's on a whole bunch of radio stations. But the easiest way to get to it is on the web, of course. And we handle a wide variety of topics, neuroscience, obviously astronomy, SETI, geology, biology. I mean, you name it, we handle it. Artificial intelligence, that kind of stuff.
Excellent. Now, wow, and indeed, many topics there that many of us and listeners to this show should go listen to. Again, because it's very important, because this is hardcore science, and this is a type of mind and minds that he associates with. And I appreciate you associating yours with mine this night, sir. Again, forgive my ignorance. I am who I am, evolutionary, believe it or not. But I agree with you. Life is floating around out there, or in some shape or forms, and whether it comes here and panspermiazes the planet, or an environment where it's applicable to where it might spread, that would be a factor. Now, with all these worlds that you're seeing out there, and you just touched on artificial intelligence, that's another sensitive subject, important subject for this show in the Martian Revelation, which we won't get into, but it deals with time, let's just say, in a war that was won, and that's going to be prevented from happening and changing that future. As crazy as that sounds, sir, what is your concepts and the scientific minds you guys speak to regards to AI and the potential for how they may communicate, whether they're trying to expound it to others or even amongst themselves, and our ability to pick it up, and would we be able to detect it?
Well, I think that's really a good question, because I'm not sure we could. Look, we're probably going to develop artificial intelligence in this century. It's probably the most important thing that's going to happen in the 21st century. You can
indeed.
spend indeed. You can spend a lot of money now. You can spend a heavy duty amount of money and build a machine that can beat any human at chess. Well, that's not a surprise. Everybody knows that. Can also beat any human at Jeopardy or Go or poker, even poker now, right? The best poker player in the world is a big computer. Of course, it doesn't fit around the poker tables in Las Vegas, so you don't have to compete with it. But that's that's impressive. But what would be much more impressive is to spend a lot of money and build a machine that could do anything cognitively that a human could do, which is to say, write a movie script or compose a symphony or write the great American novel or, host a talk show program for that matter.
Uh-huh.
And can you build a machine like that, even in principle? And the answer seems to be we will be doing that by 2050. So that's a little scary, because once you have machines like that, they design their successors. They design their kids, if you will. We don't design our kids, but they would. And so the question is, what happens when that begins? What happens to us? But that may also say something about the aliens, because they've probably already done that.
Right. Therefore, thinking ahead on how to pick up their signals, because they would probably be smart enough. Well, like Stephen Hawking there, God rest his soul, indicated, hey, you know what? Shut up. You know, you don't want just anyone showing up. You know what I mean? And in that concept, I would agree with him to some degree of, you know, who needs that Independence Day scenario, especially if it's an AI civilization. I know that might be extreme, but maybe not, sir. Because like you just said, 2050, wow. And therefore, if we're doing that now, then I'm sure in a mind like yours, you must be like thinking light years ahead then of then what must be somewhere out there in order to pick up those communiques, because obviously the Pioneer record ain't going to do it for us.
Well, no, I don't think anybody's ever going to find the Pioneer record. But yeah, it's like finding an ant floating in the Pacific. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard. So
right, just rubbing its antlers or legs or something.
Right.
You know, right. And you know, so you guys are thinking ahead. So what do you guys conceive of that AI? And would you consider it a possible threat to where maybe if we got that signal, obviously we wouldn't find out right away, but do you think that we should find out if that happened?
Well, I guess, Gary, you're suggesting that we better not respond and tell them we're here, right? That's what Stephen Hawking was saying. Don't broadcast because you don't know what's out there and they might not be friendly. Now,
right.
You know, I don't think anybody could guarantee that they'd be friendly. I mean, he's right about that. But
how do you know unless you say, outstretch your hand, right?
Yeah,
which is what you guys are kind of doing in a way.
Well, no, because we're not broadcasting. We're not broadcasting anything. We're leaving that to you, actually. If the Klingons pick up this radio show and decide,
it ain't the Klingons.
Well, whatever, and they come in and incinerate the Earth, and that'll be on you. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. We've been broadcasting into space since the Second World War, mostly radar. It's military radar that is, in fact, the strongest signal leaving the Earth. So, and the radar down at the local airport and all that sort of thing. So those signals have been going out for a very long time. And so I wouldn't worry too much about any deliberate broadcasts we might occasionally make now. We don't make anything like that. We don't even have any transmitters, but, it's kind of too late to worry about it.
Well, maybe that's what they're all showing up for and then been coming from. Our technology's been getting better over the years. We might be able to camouflage it. That's the word, like maybe those AI intelligences out there. Because, like, again, regarding that Fermi paradox and Oxford University, findings, I mean, I can see that point of view. I think it's ridiculous in a sense, but I'm not closed-minded. I took it into consideration, of course, and, I could respect that point of view. Therefore, in that point of view, anything that would survive long enough would be an AI type civilization, would it not? At least to get to the point of what maybe we should be looking for and how to detect it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it makes sense because, think about it. We're biological. But Homo sapiens has only been around for 300,000 years. Now, 300,000 years sounds like a long time, and it is if you're waiting in line at a buffet. But I got that 300,000 years is pretty short compared to the age of the universe. So, AI, which doesn't have any definite lifetime, AI could keep fixing itself, repairing itself, and improving itself, something that we have a hard time doing. That has all these advantages. So it may be that indeed, the majority of the intelligence in the cosmos is not, protoplasmic. It's not soft and squishy. It's not biological. It's all synthetic.
Do you think that would be the most likely scenario at that advanced position? You know what I'm saying? That's what it would be, rather than something of race biological that lasted, God knows, long enough to be able to accomplish that. Going by our distance, we don't look too pretty and where we're going, unless with the promise of AI and all that. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I mean, I think biological intelligence is okay. It's gotten us fairly far. But if you look at the long-term prospects, I think that, the machines have some advantages. We're stuck with these little 3-pound brains that we have. And not only that, you think about intelligence on Earth. You get born and for a while you have some fun and then they send you to school and, 12, 15, 16, 20 years later, you get out of school, you take a job, and you spend maybe 40 years doing that, and then you retire and have a little bit more fun, and then they throw you in the ground.
Yeah. First they blackball you for discovering life on Mars. But anyway,
I think you get the Nobel Prize, Gary.
Let me see. There's a good question here. I want to get it in the list. About the life. No, was this darn? I'm sorry about this brain fart. I want to get people's questions because this one was pretty good. Had to do with life on Venus or potential. Damn it! I apologize, everybody, but I gotta ask this. I'll ask someone else. Maybe I'll find it. I can't have dead air. Corey Matthew on Twitter asks, does the guest believe that the entire darkness of space and the planets and all the other bodies are part of a larger organism? Well, your type of mind, sir, go right ahead. I'll try to conceive it.
Yeah, that kind of an idea sounds rather similar to what people will frequently say. Hey, the solar system kind of looks like an atom. Maybe it's a giant atom in something else, just a small part of something that's much, much bigger. But it really isn't like an atom. I mean, it sort of superficially looks like an atom.
The end of Men in Black with the marbles, and on the cop. Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It makes for a good storyline, but
right.
It seemed to accord with physics. So there you go.
We got more ability to prove the face of Cydonia than that one, in my opinion. But Jeff W. on Google Plus asked if there has been any research to your knowledge that speaks of Venus, and life that could resist. Let me ask that again, sir. Jeff W. on Google Plus asked if there has been any research to your knowledge that speaks of Venus and life that could exist there. And do you think that we are searching the wrong planet, Mars?
Well, we may be searching the wrong planet Mars. If you can only look at one planet, right? Maybe it's better. A better bet would be some of those moons we talked about earlier, like Enceladus or
Enceladus, potato.
Whatever you want to call it. But Venus has this problem that it's like 900 degrees on the surface of Venus. So if you're down on the That's a problem because, no matter what kind of life you are, you don't survive at 900 degrees because the temperature is so high, it breaks apart all the molecules. So that's the end of you. Now,
right.
But that may not mean that there's no chance for life on Venus, just not on the surface. If you go up maybe, I don't know, a few tens of miles, then the temperature drops to something that's similar to the temperature in, I don't know, downtown Chicago. I mean, that could be a livable temperature, although I'm not so sure it is, but it could be a livable temperature. And so if you could have floating life, well, then maybe it's possible. The only problem is we don't know whether the winds in the atmosphere of Venus would allow that because the winds might go up and down. They often do. And, in certain circumstances that would be fatal because, you're happily floating along at an altitude where the temperatures are great. And then a downdraft takes you down to where it's too hot and you break apart, or it takes you up too far and you freeze. And that's the end of you too. So it's very uncertain, but it's not, put it this way, it doesn't seem to be impossible.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially that's what happened at was it a Soviet mission that went there? And we got like a picture or two before it, I guess, melted.
Yeah, that was back in the 1970s. The Venera space probes, several of them landed on the surface of Venus, and they typically lasted like 20 minutes before.
Several did.
Yeah, more than one. And they took a few photos, and then they were cooked, and that was it.
I like the word you use, I could say pun intended. It was cooked. Stacy Livingston on Facebook asked, since you were a senior astronomer at SETI, do you believe that there are many strange phenomena outside of the Earth's orbit? And can you tell us of some of the unusual things that you have found during your research?
Well, of course there are unusual things beyond Earth's orbit because, that's what astronomers do. They look for unusual stuff that's out in space. And in the course of, I'm going to say my career, but that sounds kind of past tense. But, since I first entered college, what have we found in space that we didn't know about before? Well, we found pulsars. We found quasars. We found black holes. Nobody figured on black holes. That was a discovery that was made on blackboards, not with a telescope. It was made on blackboards. It was an idea that was cooked up in the 1930s, and nobody knew whether it was real or not. Well, it seems to be real. We found all sorts of other stuff. We found that planets are as common as cheap motels in the Midwest, right? Planets are all over the place. Almost, 70, 80, 90% of all stars have planets. We didn't know that. We didn't know that 25 years ago. So, of course, there are all sorts of interesting things in space. We find stuff essentially every week. We found evidence for dark matter, dark energy. This is all stuff we didn't know. We've even gotten clues that things like the Big Bang may happen all the time, that there may be more than one universe. These are all ideas that, when I was a kid.
Men in black marbles. Oh, gosh. I didn't think, oh, my gosh. I don't know why that came to mind.
Well, yeah, the Men in Black. I keep waiting for them.
Well, the scene at the end with the marbles, the universes and the marbles. Because if you're saying there's other Big Bangs, that's what made me think visually of the other marbles. Maybe that's what they was trying to suggest.
I don't know. I think maybe Will Smith was afraid of losing his marbles. I don't know what it was.
All right. Odin asked, what do you believe the effect of the Earth will be when the star explodes in a time span between 2021 and 2022? Wait a minute. What do you believe the effect of the Earth will be when the star explodes in a time span between 2021 and 2022? What star? Our star, not our sun. Certainly hope not. I don't know. Can you understand this question?
No, I suppose he meant, what do I think the effect would be on the Earth, but I don't know what he's talking about. The sun has about another 5 billion years to go. So I don't know what this 2021 to 2022 is. Maybe he's been reading some prophecy that he read in a fortune cookie.
Well, they did have Chinese tonight. But anyway, all right, I think this question you already answered, but I'll ask it. Doris asked, do you believe that the next stage of development will be AI, and why will AI be the next existence? That's part maybe the second part you could elaborate on more.
Yeah, well, as we did discuss, people are working quite hard on artificial intelligence, and the predictions that I hear from people who are in the field is that by 2050, you may have examples of what's called artificial generalized intelligence, which is to say a box you can put in your spare bedroom that's as smart as you are. Okay. Now, you could charge it rent, or at least part of the mortgage. Now, that's what they say, and there are plenty of people who say, oh, you'll never do that. You'll never make a machine that's as clever as my next-door neighbor. Well, in my case, the next-door neighbors are not all that clever, so who knows? But if it isn't 2050, they may be wrong about 2050, but if they're wrong about 2050, then you can say, well, certainly by 2100 or 2150, none of those numbers really differ. They're all the same number, which is to say, within a couple of lifetimes, we will have machines that are smarter than we are. So then what happens to us? I don't know. Maybe we just become their pets, which is okay because you get to sleep a lot and get fed regularly. So I'm not against that. But it could very well be that, there are people who think, well, we should upload ourselves into the machines, and that way we're immortal. That sounds like a science fiction story to me. I don't know how we upload ourselves, but maybe that's just a technical problem left to the student.
You know what? That's a nice quote. I think I'll remember that one. Ask him about the UFOs and ET life, and what are the odds they left Mars and have returned here to see their children. I guess, well, ultimately you could connect that to, the panspermia effect from Mars, but in a greater science fiction form you'd probably allude to. But it would be interesting to hear your answer.
Well, again, I'm not quite sure what the question is, but if what they're saying is that, look, we're descended from Martians, and consequently the the original Martians have come back to take a look at us as their descendants, and therefore their children. If that's what's meant, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if we were infected by Mars, say 3.5, 4 billion years ago, that's possible. That's possible. Mars could have had life 3, 4 billion years ago, and maybe Earth didn't, if you're talking 4 billion years ago. And, a rock slams into Mars. Rocks are always slamming into Mars, and kicks off some dirt clods. And one of those dirt clods actually comes down to Earth and infects this planet, and we're the descendants of all that. But that means that our Martian ancestors were microbes. So, what is meant by the Martians coming back? You mean the microbes have come back to see us?
I guess those who have created the faces of Mars and the ancient civilization that Dana Rohrabacher not too long ago stated before a NASA council, stating that certain people, not researchers on the outside or people you allude to that is known or heard on radio, but certain people, obviously in government, excuse me, that stated an extraterrestrial, ancient extraterrestrial civilization on Mars, thousands of years old. He was corrected immediately regarding thousands to millions, and that it would be, and that there was no evidence, of course, for the extraterrestrial civilization, and they dropped that. So basically, in that light.
Yeah, well, look, the face on Mars, when it was first seen, it was kind of touted by NASA because, the public was getting a little bored by the Viking mission. They were really excited about seeing Mars at first, but when it turned out that Mars was covered in craters, basically, a very inhospitable desert with an average temperature of about -50 and no water on the surface and almost no air, the public kind of was losing interest. And somebody at NASA was looking through the photos and said, hey, this is pretty amusing. Here's a mountain that kind of looks like a face. And they put it out there. And some people took it seriously. They said it is a face. Now, that's, again, like mine looking at a bunch of potatoes and saying, hey, here's one that looks like Richard Nixon. But it doesn't mean that it's an attempt by Richard Nixon to signal me. It's just a potato that looks like Richard Nixon. So this is a rock that looked like a face. But since that photo was made in the 1970s, as you know, Gary, there have been plenty of other photos made of that thing, or at least some, with much better cameras. And and they look like a rock. So what do you say to that? And besides,
I don't see that.
Oh, it doesn't look like a rock to you?
I see an artistical, sculpted, metallic work of intelligent art that goes beyond even the face, that encompasses the whole hemisphere, and even originally used to go around the whole planet. Mars is artistically sculpted on an entire planetary scale, because as an artist, that is what I have come to see over the years. And I started out with that face, and I wasn't a believer at all in it as well, especially from the 1998 release, which started it all for me. And again, I'm not getting into that now, but I'll just say, out of the multiple imagery over the years released by NASA and the various missions, even ESA. ESA showed a tattoo. Now we have 11 or 12 different SWATs from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, CTX camera imager. I process the images myself. They don't look anything like how NASA shows what's in those images for those image numbers. The details are there. It's exquisite. As a matter of fact, Mr. Shostak, it's on www.thefacesofmars.com under your bio. I show 3 pictures there I've had there for the past couple weeks. And it's a combination of 2 of those MRO CTX images, to which the details you see, sir, no one has shown or even anything like this, because it's a combination of just 2 of those images where fused together, we could see the details each would share what the others don't, because they're separated. I had to fuse them together. Very interesting and very telling, and that's why President Pence wants to send American boots there before the Russians and the Chinese get there, and with their space weaponry. So whoever gets there first, I'm told, whether we're there now in a secret space program or not is beyond me. I'm sure you hear about all those things too, and it's like, wow. But no, I really don't, and it's not because pareidolia, what are the things that they wanted. I really study this thing, sir. This area I've been studying since '98, and I'm a serious Mars independent researcher an image analyst. And again, like I said, I processed them myself. And lo and behold, the details. Yeah, I see consistencies of even the 98 phase. A lot of people get pissed. They don't understand that the 98 phase release since 1976 was taken at an oblique angle because it was aero braking, finishing aero braking. It was taken at an angle. And but like you said, in 2001, there's been releases, and that's what a lot of people see is just rock. But to me, I'm not seeing that. It's so massive because then who the hell did the tattoo all over it? That doesn't make sense. In that sense, to me, sir, and not to disparage you or your work or your brilliant mind, please forgive me. If you take me that way, I mean no offense. But I'm seeing an exquisite work of Martian art, intelligent art that its eye was following. Because of the way it's carved, sir, by intelligent art, its eye would follow you as you would traverse across the sky. And not only that, just in its existence itself, I will help Hosel one day for the future to make sure it falls into SETI realms. No offense.
Well, how long ago do you think it was put there, Gary?
That's irrelevant. It's a great question that needs to be answered. And there are those, but here's the thing. You mentioned it's a desert dust heap as it was, the way it was destroyed. Well, whatever may possibly remain on this planet, after such events, whether we blow ourselves up or some other catastrophe, whether it's Nibiru or just even an impact, sir, and you know the dangers of that alone that we're looking for, just an impact, an ELE event, extinction level event could cause. And over the millennia of time, what will remain? Will the steel cities or will it be the pyramids that might come up? Being eroded back from what was once buried, and then whoever flies then, whether a robotic intelligence or some other biological life form that may happen to pass by and say, "Oh, look at that." Well, it can't be. Look at that place. It's a wreck. There's no way.
Yeah, but I think you would see some things. You would see big pools of radioactivity where there were.
They have, according to Dr. Brandenburg.
Well, I don't know who Dr. Brandenburg is, but okay.
Dr. John Brandenburg, nuclear physicist, also was geologist for the Viking mission, I believe. They also found the Xeon 129 evidence there. That only comes not from any type of natural, a nuclear processing or detonations, but through weaponized. That they were up the ante too of why they might have wanted to play down the face. Thus, because the same year, again, please forgive me, I mean no disparagement to you, but you get these calls every day. So what I'm saying is nothing new to you. I know maybe sometimes you not want to hear it, but the listeners, I have to address this because of what we're faced with, pun intended, in the Martian revelation, and where we're going here, and where your work, sir, is exemplary and as well as very important, and I would say more than the discovery of amoebas. Well, that's more important to us, Space Force. That's more important than what you do to the humanity overall as we explore the cosmos. Because, again, are they friendly or not? We got to get smart enough. And you think we'll use AI technology on those outward missions to help look for those where we cannot, if ourselves aboard our own craft, as it was, that it would detect them?
Well, listen, if you're asking what the future application of AI is, of course we'll use it.
And SETI. Because we'll be going out there at that point. Yeah, we'll need SETI. We'll need SETI to survive.
Well, I don't know about that, but we're already using AI in SETI, but your doctor's going to use it too. You're right. You walk into the doctor and you got some ache or pain or whatever, some symptom, and if he's seen it before, he might be able to diagnose it. You hope that. But if you had a bit of AI in the office, it wouldn't forget all those rare diseases that you had forgotten about, or he had forgotten about, your doctor had forgotten about. You would want AI to do that. Otherwise, who knows? The diagnosis could be wrong, and they often are. So you're going to use AI wherever it makes sense. And it's going to make sense in a lot of applications, unfortunately, for some experts.
Ooh, a great question from a Georgie just came in then. And about the AI in the face. Check this out. Then Mr. Seth Shostak, sir, then would it be possible that if you were to consider the face of, if you were able to see it, would it then most likely have been made by an AI intelligence, since it looks so like higher than human advanced in its art and its sculpting of planetary surface? I think that's, in a way, is a good question.
Well, I have to say that, to me, everybody I've talked to who thinks that the face is a face, they,
well, again, this is hypothetical from your point of view.
Right, of course. Yeah, I don't think it looks like a face, but there are people who do. But if
it was, hypothetically, would you attribute it to a biological life form, or more of that AI intelligence being able to be that high advanced to do something like that to a planet?
You got to ask yourself if some machine down in the lab here that's artificial intelligence, that's able to write music or something, is going to engage in a civil engineering project on Mars to create a replica of a human face. There weren't any human.
Oh, it's not human.
Oh, it's not human. What is it? A trilobite?
It looks like King Kong reptilian saurian on one side. Well, think of the Mayan split glass. It's like that, hominid and feline, showing somewhere on the planet where it should not be. Now, is that coincidence or not? Okay. Some people say Rorschach. Okay, but then they're discounting at least what we know here terrestrially on Earth as a civilization language, as it was, showing those life forms that we're familiar with as we know it on Earth, at least visually, how we interpret it. How can that be possible? But if it is possible, does it represent what we're seeing in those glyphs? Only in the split factor. I'm not seeing that mug. I'm seeing from that apish King Kong saurian type of face. It's not human. Whatever did, but the other side looks like Leo the lion, as it was. Other things too, if you're more artistically minded and creative. Some people say crazy, but or mad, like Mad Martian here. They don't call me that for nothing. But Seth, you bring up a good question now. Regardless what motive it shows, if it's real, I think it's higher than human. Therefore, I think that falls into an AI intelligence of maybe at least passing by, doing something. And we know that Mars throws flashes off every so many years. How do we know, sir? That falls into SETI possibilities, because maybe it's throwing off signals because of its art-carved surface. At certain times of the year or positions, it would be able to send its light. It's transmissions of light, maybe to show what orbit that planet is. If they're in another solar system and they could see that far and they carved up a planet, just follow me, sir, and it throws off beams periodically. Okay, it's in sync to where we knew it was 40 years ago, 100 years ago. We could predict its orbit where it's going to flash to us again. If anything's wrong in the solar system, it don't flash, it's time to get over there.
Well, I'm not sure, Gary, what you've been talking about here for the past 2 minutes.
I know it sounds nuts. What I'm talking about is like, instead of an intelligence sending a light signal, I'm talking about a signal sent through light, not radio.
Yeah, but what light signals are you talking about?
Let's say if Mars, hypothetically, consider this. If Mars was this big artistical wonder, periodically, as we science know, the Japanese proved this years ago, and 40 years before that, light flashes, mainly from Arum and another area, but not at the same time now, mind you, so that's interesting. Throws off bright light signals. And, well, bright light, but maybe that bright light flashes could be signals to whoever carved that surface that deliberately carved it to send out that light whenever the sun hits it at a certain time or a certain way, where that light would travel to whoever would be viewing it to make sure maybe the planet is in sync. I don't know, but it would fall under a line of SETI in a sense of communication through light by an advanced intelligence.
Well, okay, can you describe...
Hopefully that makes a little more sense.
Well, can you describe these light flashes? Because I'm not aware of any light flashes from Mars.
Oh, you weren't? No. Oh, well, the Japanese detected it, in the early 2000s, of coming off of Arum. I guess the sun would hit it a certain way, or at least that's the theory, because no one has any explanation what these certain lights that just flare up. I mean, brightly glint off the surface of the planet.
How do they flash?
How long? Oh, well, from what they say, anywhere from, I think it was 40 seconds or 40 minutes or something. I think it was, but it was a couple like flashes, bright flashes, and then it wouldn't happen again. But 40 years previously, those same type of sequences of flashes happened.
Yeah. Well, look, I've never read anything about this. It's not to say it isn't true, but I've never read anything about this.
I'll dig up more information and send you a link. But in that sense, does that make sense of a form of light communication?
Well,
regardless what you believe.
You can make anything up you want. But what I'm trying to do is think of any phenomena that could account for light flashes from Mars. Now, Mars has a lot of ice on it. That we know.
No, there's no ice there. Not where these flashes were. These were near the equatorial range.
Well, even on the equatorial regions of Mars, there's ice. Yeah, there's ice when you get to low altitude because it's shadowed and it's cold. But, you know,
well, we would see that in the modern orbiters, if the ice there. We should see reflections. We don't. Not like that. That would be constant.
But it depends on the geometry of the sun. So, you know, you would see them if just like an orbiter would see bright lights coming off the oceans of the Earth, an orbiter around the Earth, when you get those reflections. I'm not saying that's what it is, but that makes sense. And as far as saying, oh, well, it could be signals to somebody telling them something or other.
What I'm asking is, would it be possible that an intelligence or an AI intelligence would conceive of such a means of communication using light?
Yeah, but not 40-second or 40-minute flashes. You don't get any.
My ignorance on the time frame. I got to dig that up, but it will be brought up on this show. And thank you for letting me make a note of it and bringing that in my memory again, sir. Let me see. There's more questions here. What do you think, Tori on Google? God, I need glasses. I'm at that age. I can't believe I'm saying it. I'm an image processor. I need my eyes. Tori on Google Plus asked, what does the guest think of the research of Stephen Hawking? It says Hawkins, but I think it's Hawking.
Yeah, Stephen Hawking. Well, listen, what I think of him really doesn't matter. The world knows that Stephen Hawking was certainly one of the best physicists ever around. In fact, I mean, obviously, I have a great deal of admiration for him, and he came up with some very interesting ideas that are going to be true in physics for a very long time, forever. And as it turns out, I've met him, and I actually know some members of his family.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm sure, again, brilliant minds, connect together. Again, please don't be angry at me.
No, I'm not angry.
I go. I mean, you talked to me years ago. All right. So you'll be a guest again in the future then.
Okay.
Oh, all right. I got it. Okay. All right. But Odin said, here is your fortune cookie again. Chomp well. The question was, Odin asked, what do you believe the effect of the Earth will be when the star explodes in a time span between 21 and 22? The stars are of the binary star system is known as KIC 983 2227 and consists of two stars that orbit each other once every 11 hours or so. Man, you think they'll be like bangers, they'll bang into each other. But astronomers predict that the binary star will merge and create a bright explosion visible in the constellation Cygnus and will be seen on Earth. Does this ring any bells? And do you believe that the show Outer Limits show episode Music of the Spheres could come true?
No, I don't. He better tell me what the script was for the Outer Limits Music of the Spheres, because
I think I've seen it as a kid, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember it either. Listen, orbiting stars do eventually, their orbits decay and they collide. To say that one's going to do that in 2 years strikes me as kind of bizarre. Usually you can't predict things that well, but, whatever. But if you just have two stars that collide and merge, yeah, it makes a bright flash, that's for sure. Will it be visible from Earth? Yeah, if you got a telescope. It'll be
Indeed. There you go. You got to have intelligence for that, too. On that note, let's take a last break. And then when I come back, I'll give out a phone number just in case anyone wants to pick up the dusty phone and have a question here for Mr. Seth Shostak, or any opinion that you may have supporting or not supporting Dr. Gil Levin's Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign. We shall be back in about 5 minutes.
I'll be back.
Don't run. We are your friends.
call in. Let me know that the damn thing works. Come on. 202-559-7943. Again, 202-559-7943. And please go to www.SethShostak.com. SethShostak.com. And there you will have access to links to his books, as well as to his radio show, his weekly radio program, which I'm going to start listening to as well. Again, man, a fascinating mind here. And I can, again, appreciate your position, Mr. Shostak, and especially in dealing with these issues. And I know you walk a tightrope, and I know you may not agree to that, but I think I know you know what I'm talking about. And again, I commend you for people that call you and talk to you about these things, and that you do talk to people about them. I just can't wait till the day that things get talked about more, because like the song says, open your eyes, open your mind. This is what it's all about. And that is what you helped do to me over the years, sir. Regardless, what you think of me or my work, especially what I see and what many others see and what NASA fails to see. And that is life on Mars. Whether present, past, or extant is yet to, be determined for the extant part. But again, anyone want to call in 202-559-7943. And I got a question here from Brandy on Facebook, and she asked if the dark dwarf star that was discovered is our second sun. I guess they're alluding to that body that they've discovered outside or coming in our solar system.
Well, I'm not sure which that is either. Is this Nibiru, the famous Nibiru? Or
that's what people like to attribute it to, but I think the news and mainstream people, science people, didn't attribute it to as Nibiru, but as some type of, I guess, big body.
Well, then maybe they're talking about Oumuamua, which was in the news a couple of months ago. It looked like a cigar.
That was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But no, they're talking about I guess a body that they would detected outside the solar system, and that it may be the actual perturber of the outer planets, but it's certainly big enough that it probably would if it does come in our solar system. But they think it's a part of like a binary sun. Are you aware of if we are or are not part of a binary system, like of what they're discovering out there with other planets and solar systems?
Well, that idea goes back hundreds of years, actually. The idea that there might be another, that the sun might have a companion star. But there's really no good evidence for that. Lamentably, that's too bad. It would be interesting. But really, if it were close enough, if it were, say, beyond Pluto, but not enormously beyond Pluto, then, you would see it. I mean, it would be very simple. You could just see it.
Well, that makes logical sense. Some may say, though, that research going down at Antarctica helps cover that. But again, you hear that, too, all the time, I'm sure. Other than that, so what have you been working on lately? I mean, and where are we now in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence of having any hopes of receiving, or have we received, my friend?
Well, if we had received something, I would be in Stockholm collecting a prize, Gary. But but the facts are that we are using, we observe the sky every night using our radio antennas, the Allen Telescope Array, which is located in Northern California, up in the Cascade Mountains. Anybody can go visit it if they want. But in any case, mostly what we're looking at are red dwarf stars. These are sort of runty little stars, much smaller than the sun in some cases. Not always, enormously smaller than the sun, maybe half the size typically. But these are very plentiful kinds of stars. They're known to have planets, and they are known to have at least some planets that look like they could be habitable. So we're pointing our antennas in those directions. We've also been looking at things like Tabby Star. Tabby Star was in the news past couple of years, actually. It's a star that it's pretty far away. It's like 1,400 light years away, but it's a star that's known to dim quite a bit every now and again. So the question is, why is it dimming? Could it have some sort of alien megastructure around it? Looks like that's not the case, but...
Bing! Oh, really? It was discovered that that's not the case? Because I would think that would fall under SETI perspectives big time.
Well,
because how do we know that thing's not throwing out signals like the flashes of Mars?
Well, we've looked for them and we haven't seen any. But it's also very far away, so it's very hard to detect any signals. I mean, it's enormously far away. But
so it's on the drawing board for future study.
Well, it's always something that you continue to study. But as part of those future studies that were done in the past 6 months or a year, we now know that the dimming is more in the blue than in the red. In other words, when it dims, the star gets a lot redder. And that's just like the dimming you see when you go down to the beach and watch the sunset. It gets red.
Or watch the clouds of smoke, fires coming across and seeing the moon through it.
Yeah, it's just the dust. Yeah, it's just the dust.
So you think it's cosmic dust or asteroids or field?
Well, it could be dust from asteroids, but it's undoubtedly dust that's very close to that star. So it's dust in that star system. I mean, there's dust in our solar system too. So dust is a very common component of the universe. But
and so is microbes.
Well, that we don't yet know, but we will soon, I think.
Well, your panspermia, you said yourself, they're all floating around in space. But Cameron asked, do you have any explanation of gravitational waves? Would that fall under any type of SETI-type studies? I don't know.
It's hard to make gravitational waves. Look, gravitational waves were predicted by Einstein 100 years ago, right? But they've only been detected in the past couple of years because we didn't have the instruments that could detect them. It's very hard to detect gravitational waves. I mean, if you wave your hands around, you're making gravitational waves, but they're so gosh darn weak, we couldn't detect them. But they're there. That's predicted by Einstein's theory of relativity.
Hey, Seth, what if they were really strong? You think an artificial intelligence, because just like how the face and everything else was carved, they would need higher than human. So what if they figured out how to harness gravitational waves where it is strong? Could any type of beneficial use come from that to possibly send a signal and or information? That might be a stupid question. I'm sure you thought I asked a few tonight.
Well, look, it may be. I mean, it's not, who knows what the civilizations that are a million years more advanced than we are might be doing. And maybe they use gravitational waves for sending information around. It seems like a really hard thing to do, because in order to make a gravitational wave that's strong, you essentially have to shake a black hole or something like that. That's hard to do. Even as a science fair project, that's hard. But, who knows what the aliens might be doing. However, if there were a lot of really powerful gravitational waves around, I think that they would have found them with the instrument, the LIGO instrument, which, as you know, has got some very sensitive equipment down in Louisiana and also up in Washington State. So they find gravitational waves, but they're not, they're not so powerful that I think the Klingons are responsible.
Right, well, definitely not them. But do you think if someone did, is there a way to, how would you send a message or use that to an advantage to send transmissions? I mean, these are the things I'm sure you guys ask yourself all the time, because you guys are, using radio astronomy. And again, at some point that could be just like the Pioneer plaque record at some point. I read that in a recent scientific article. And I was wondering, what do you guys also talk about or theorize about of other methods or even utilizing other types of methods to detect? I mean, what else could it be that we're looking for? Maybe light would be much easier than any gravitational form for us anyway. But, you see where I'm going? What other avenues do you see as potential other than that type of transmission and receiving? How else can be utilized that you guys are thinking about? Because you guys are the minds. Again, forget my stupidity.
Yeah, well, look, people do think about other ways of sending bits of information from one place to another. Radio is what we look for, but it's not the only thing we look for. We also look for flashing laser lights. Haven't seen any from Mars, I got to tell you. But
no, it wasn't lasers that came off of Mars, though. Again, I'll get you more info on that, sir. Okay. So then I won't sound that dumb. So all right. So
but
anything
also,
being
could be neutrinos. Right, that might be a way to communicate. They just picked up an interesting neutrino a couple of days ago. That was in the news. That apparently comes from a black hole that's about 5 billion light years away. But neutrinos don't. They have a lot of disadvantages, but on the other hand, they have some advantages for signaling. So maybe some advanced critters are using neutrinos to signal. These are all ways of sending, as I say, information from one place to another.
Right. And therefore, do we have any other applications that could look for various means other than radio telescopes or radio broadcast?
Well, as I say, obviously radio, but also light, looking for flashing lights in the sky. We're just developing technology these days that could see things like that. I mean, if somebody aimed a laser in our direction at our solar system from who knows how many hundreds of light years away and just flashed it for a billionth of a second every 2 weeks, we wouldn't know about it. We wouldn't have been able to find it. But that's changing. That's changing.
Excellent. I look forward to that, and it will, and it must, especially as the Martian revelations upon us. And for any reality of the science fiction becoming science fact with its Space Force. Buck Rogers time, everybody. So get your boots on. You're going to go to the face of Mars. But in that sense, all right, Brandy said, here is the information about the dwarf star. All right, what do you think if the discovery, a huge monster planet that's far too big for its sun, could lead scientists to rethink their theories of astronomy? The planet known as NGTS-1b, gosh, these weird names, is the size of Jupiter, but it orbits around a red dwarf star that's only half the size of our sun.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can have a planet that's the size of Jupiter orbiting a red dwarf star, because a red dwarf star could be, 500,000 miles across, right? Or even more. The 500,000 miles across, all right, what's the diameter of Jupiter? It's maybe 100,000 miles across. So, the planet's one-fifth the diameter of the star. Yeah, you could have that. You could have that.
That is the dark dwarf star, huh? All right, whatchamacallit? Oumuamua. Am I saying that name right? Oumuamua. You referenced that earlier. Were you guys honing in on that? Did that throw off any oddities, whether light glints or any static or any radio transmission, anything that would allude to its odd, well, just coming in out of nowhere and basically using something in our solar system to slingshot out of here?
Well, we didn't find anything coming from Oumuamua, and because it was pretty close, it was about as far away as Mars or Jupiter. It was between Mars and Jupiter in distance. At the time we were observing it, we could have picked up...
Between Mars and Jupiter, that I didn't know. I was ignorant of. I brain farted that. So that's implicating. You think that could be a reasoning of Dr. Tom Van Flanders' exploded planet and the celestial mechanics of, well, I guess it's exploded artifacts maybe coming back? Could that be part of the asteroid belt originally, from the original body?
No, it's not from our asteroid belt. It's not from our solar system. And we know
that. At one time, I mean. No, but that would be a no either way. Because you guys would be able to hone in on the celestial mechanics of that to show that, right?
Exactly. You can tell from the orbit that it's not from our solar system. But it looks like an asteroid from our solar system, so it's not much different. Right, but we didn't detect any radio signals coming off it, and because it was relatively close, we could have picked up signals that were basically no stronger than you get from a cell phone. So we didn't find anything. So I think it's an asteroid. It's not one of our asteroids. It's somebody else's asteroid that got kicked out of their solar system and made it to ours.
All right, and Jose asks, do you think, because of being a cigar-shaped craft, do you think it could have been here observing us as a potential body? Again, like, because he brings up, because Phobos has been known, or at least alluded to, as being hollow and potential space station. All right. In that sense, do you think that could have been utilized as, as an intelligently steered craft in that sense?
Well, a lot of people like that idea, that perhaps they'd read Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama, and so they like the idea that an asteroid's been hollowed out by some aliens and uses a spacecraft. But there's absolutely no evidence that that's true, whereas there's plenty of evidence that it's just an asteroid.
Do you think we should be doing that?
No, I think that's...
Wouldn't that help us?
Hollowing out, I don't know. Look, why hollow out an asteroid when you can just build the whole thing from aluminum or something else? I mean, that way it has the shape you want it to have instead of what you're stuck with. So,
well, that's an intelligently designed question. All right, I like your answer on that. All right. Let me see here. So, again, we don't have much time left, but I do want to allude to the Dr. Gill Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign. Now, all right, you're not willing but were you willing to support and sign the petition at least? Because I believe you said you agreed that, well, we should have replicative tests, more souped up and beefed up for that. You said you would be willing to have those tests put on the next rovers. Would you sign the petition for that, sir?
No, I'm not going to sign petitions to tell other scientists what they ought to do. Nobody would want you to do that. It would be like signing a petition to tell my doctor, hey, look, this is the way I want you to carry out this surgery.
Well, this is the Republic, the Republic process, though. The voice of the people obviously hasn't had a means of or any say in the way NASA has been progressing or going about the turtle pace speed.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I'm not sure why you say that. Look, the people could have encouraged NASA to go to Mars, but their representatives in Congress said it's too expensive. We're not going to do it.
Right, exactly. The NASA budget defenders. It's up to them. It's not the scientists. It's them who control everything. I knew it. And now that's why we need a petition and why I'm fighting for Dr. Gillivan. He's 94 years old, sir. I mean, come on. Give him a break. I mean, especially when, look at the things we're dealing with today. I mean, I think I don't want to argue it with you because I respect you, but you did say, though, that you would agree at least that there should be replicative tests souped up of his experiments on board these next rovers, right?
I think that they ought to put the most sensitive tests they can to look for biology. Right? Biology. That's it. And maybe replicating his tests is the way to go, but it's not guaranteed, at least from my point of view, it's not entirely sure that that's the best approach anymore. That was the approach 40 years ago.
Well, yes, but yet they still haven't, have the technology. They just stated, to detect life. So this is, it's getting old, and they want to spend many more years, many more missions, and billions of more dollars. And by the time we send people there, it'll be in the 2050s. And I don't have that long.
Well, you got to eat those veggies.
Hey, Gary, will you have a caller?
And I want Dr. Gill to be, vindicated and validated. I went through 12 years of why you haven't heard me on the show since, because of an issue that I need validation and vindication for too, which validates and vindicates his work. But now the show is back on through time, and I'm back through time, and the Martian revelation's upon us. And you, sir, you're more important than you realize to all of this and what I'm talking about. I know I'm talking nuts in your mind,
Gary,
sir,
you have a caller.
And that you're still on with me, but we're coming down to the close of the show. Is there anything you'd like to give out real quick or say? Maybe any books or future viewings you're going to have?
Well, I've been watching Daryl here, and he seems to indicate that there's a caller. Did you want to go to the caller?
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know that. If there's a caller, let's do it. Daryl's the man and the man with the time. I'm on as long as they allow. Thanks to L&M Radio Network. The only place you'll find this.
All right. Well, Daryl, then put through the caller.
You have a caller,
Please.
Seraphine. You're on.
Yeah.
Hi, Seraphine. How you doing?
Hi, Gary. I'm doing okay. How are you guys doing?
All right. I hopefully Mr. Shostak's all right with me, but I love this guy. I don't care what people say, and I understand his position, and it is how it is. But we the people, I believe that we could change all that. But Seraphine, let me not cut you off. You have such a pretty voice. What would you like to say?
Thank you so much. My question is based on some research that I did after you were on my show, and it's just a quick question. So if extraterrestrial life exists in our solar system, wouldn't it be more advanced than bacteria?
All right. Well, it's an interesting question, but probably not, because if you look at the places where you could have life in our solar system, right? Mars. Well, Gary talks a lot about Mars, but Mars is
You'll never forget me, sir.
Yeah, it's a pretty rugged place, right? I mean, to live on the surface, you really can't do it. You could take all the mammals and reptiles and everything else of Earth and dump them onto Mars tomorrow and come back a year later. They'd all be dead very quickly, right? Only bacteria could survive on Mars. And even then, only if they could get underneath, some pieces of sand or under a rock or something so that they're protected from the ultraviolet from the sun. So Mars is a terrible place for life on the surface. There may be life underneath, but that would be bacterial. Now, there are other places where there might be life in the solar system, 3 moons of Jupiter, 2 moons of Saturn, maybe a couple of other places. But those conditions are, once again, only going to be suitable for microbial life. There isn't enough food for one thing in any of those places.
Would Dr. Gil Levin's test be good if we were able to utilize it aboard a probe to sweep through the plumes coming off of Enceladus? Well,
I don't know that you would do that experiment. Maybe.
I don't see why not. We've made it a circling, orbiting around comet or asteroids already. Yeah. Certainly, we could pass through some plumes of a moon and collect its debris. Yeah, no, that's right. That's why Enceladus is so interesting, because you don't have to land on it. You could just, as you say, just fly a catcher's mitt by it, grab some of that stuff, but you wouldn't have to, put a complicated experiment like Gil Levin's experiment on the spacecraft. Just bring the sample back and analyze it in the laboratories here on Earth, where you have a lot more possibilities. I don't believe in bringing it back to Earth. We need to bring it back to orbit. People are worried about infecting microbes on Mars by our germs going there, for crying out loud. Who cares? But bringing it back to Earth? No, I think it should be studied on a space platform facility that's going to be needed, not the International Space Station, or we could utilize that even, need be, before we send it back to the Earth to make sure it's safe. I'm sure you agree to at least that part. Seraphine, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I have a random question for Seth, if he's up for it.
Sure.
It's up to Seth. Go ahead.
I'm sorry I came in on your conversation like an hour in. I had to be at a birthday party. I apologize. So if you already answered this, I'm sorry.
Was it a good party at least?
From what I saw, that I was actually performing at it. So.
Oh, one of those parties. All right, but
no, I was singing at it.
Oh. All right. So what's the question? I'm interested to hear this.
My random question, because I kind of am into SETI for a lot of different reasons, and I was planning on listening to Seth's whole thing here, but I didn't get a chance. But wouldn't the vast distances of space distort SETI signals into unintelligible forms? Like when you're bouncing a signal out and it comes back, does it ever come apart on you, or turn into something different?
Yeah, a lot of people think that because of the vast distances in space, which you allude to there, that the signals would be too weak to pick up. But that depends on how much money they spend on their transmitter. I mean, you can always pick up a signal if the transmitted signal is powerful enough, or if you have a big enough antenna. But it is true that space will distort any signal that has information on it. And it depending on how far it's come and how much information is on the signal, it might, in fact, kind of scramble it so that you might not understand, the bits, that you might not be able to get, if you will, the information in the signal. But you would get the signal. You would at least know there's somebody at the other end behind a microphone or whatever they're behind. So that much you would know, but you might not, in fact, get the sonnets or the rock music or whatever it is that they're sending your way.
Yes. Or other things. Sorry, Seraphine, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to kind of bounce off that a little bit. So once you realize that something is distorted, is there like a turnaround for time as well as being able to string that signal back together and figure out what it actually did contain?
You might not be able to bring it back together. You could always transmit, a response, I suppose, and say, hi, look, we're the Earthlings, and we didn't quite get that. Could you repeat it? But if they're 500 light years, if they're 500 light years away, it's going to be 1,000 years before you hear back, by which point your personal interest in the project will probably be less.
It will cease to be.
Well, that's true, though. To cross space, you have to cross what? Time.
Well, yeah. I mean, the speed of light is finite. Even to get something back from Mars takes a while.
Right. So time is always a factor, is what you're saying there.
It is.
It affects things, even broadcasts through time, pun intended. And the listeners monitoring this show down through time know well what I'm talking about. Anyway, so anything else, Seraphine? I thank you for calling. The phone works.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a fine evening, and thank you for taking my call.
All right, no problem. Thanks, Seraphine, for testing that, and hope to speak to you again soon. Thanks for listening to the show.
Guys.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. So, all right, Mr. Shostak, let me see if I have any other questions here as time's dwindling. More or less. Oh, how can life be determined as more significant or less when life is living? Well, I guess that's a kind of a good question. Trick question?
Well, I don't know. What do you think the question means, Gary?
All right. How can life be determined as more significant or less when life is living? I guess that would have to be on our level of intelligence to determine what that would be. Hopefully that makes sense, because otherwise, I don't know. How would we? Well, visually, without any other means, if we were to just pluck it out of the air and see if there's life there, if we had that technology, like you said, everything's already out in space, panspermia. So in that sense, how do we know some of those things aren't even carrying signals? But I don't know. I don't know what it means. What do you think it means?
I have no idea what it means. But and the facts are that we don't know that panspermia exists either. But it's possible. It's possible that if a rock slams into a planet with life on it, some of that life could get kicked up, into space via that rock. But we've never found anything like that. So,
the meteorites from Mars, if that's consistent with, right. But so I think it's probable. It's a probable scenario. It makes sense.
Scenario. It's possible. I don't know if it's probable, but it's possible for sure.
Well, we could test that.
Yeah,
we could test that.
If we found a rock that had some, clearly organic, some organisms in it, dead or alive, it'd probably be dead, but maybe, then you would have proven that it works.
Or dormant. All right, right, or dormant. But I'm saying that maybe we could bring some of these things, let's say Mars or elsewhere, and do these tests. And, like I said long ago, why didn't the rovers just bring a glass of water, put the camera down, let us see it, dump it, or just put the glass on the ground and let's see how long it takes to evaporate and what happens if and when it does. Because they say that water cannot physically exist in the liquid form. At least that's what we used to be taught. Maybe that's being changed now with all this other information. Because we do know that water is certainly in the so-called, I'll just say, surface.
Well, no, I think you can feel fairly confident that if you were to take a glass of water to Mars, which is, by the way, an expensive thing to do because water is pretty dense, so it's pretty heavy. It takes a lot of fuel to send a glass of water to Mars. But let's say you did it, and let's say you had a little robotic mechanism. When it got to Mars,
would it be much more than Dr. Gill's experiments? But go ahead, sir.
Well, no, probably not. But Dr. Gill's experiments probably didn't weigh much more than a couple of glasses of water, to be honest. But if you took a glass of water and you poured it on the surface of Mars, because the pressure of the atmosphere there is so low, there's so little air on Mars, that water would immediately sublimate. It's like dry ice from the ice cream guy. You're right. It takes a block of dry ice out of the back of the truck. Right. And what happens? It turns into vapor. You can see it just turning directly into vapor. It doesn't form a puddle. It just turns into vapor, and that's what would happen with the water.
I want to see that test. I want to see it, just this for craps and giggles. Let's, for the hell of it. Like the microphone idea I had years ago. Now they want to applicate it. I jokingly said, I'll sue them for plagiarism for the idea. But anyway, Jose writes, an amoeba is alive, a cell is alive, a dog is alive. But if you are saying that an alien is more or less, or are you saying an alien is more or less significant than an amoeba, and are the scientific minds determining life's value?
No, we leave that to the. No, I think, okay. It sounds like a question for a philosopher. I mean, I don't know. Is an alien life worth more than a human life, or worth more than the life of a hippo? I mean, I don't know.
That will become the question of AI as well soon.
That's
right.
between you and the Lord.
Well, bingo. So interesting. Okay. Is there anything you would like to talk about? Presentations recently, or showings, or anything exciting where to look forward to in next coming days or weeks, sir, or months?
No, I don't think so. I actually have to get out of here because I got to get up early tomorrow morning, and it's getting kind of late here. But it's probably even later where you are. No, I can't say there's anything. I have an article that's going to come out tomorrow sometime on NBC News in their science section about a story that a paper that was published by some guys in England at Oxford University about how we might be the only intelligent beings in the universe. So if you're interested in that idea, you could read about that tomorrow.
Excellent. And I know there's listeners that will be. Again, I am interested in those things, and I do consider them. Just don't take me the wrong way because of what I see and what my work leads me, and where I'm going to lead the future, sir. Please, I highly respect you, and the future is going to be much different than what it has been the past 40 years. I guarantee you that, especially since I'm here and I'm alive and I'm back through time and the Martian revelations here. And I hope to have you on as a future guest again. Are you still willing, sir?
Send me an email, Gary.
I appreciate it, Mr. Shostak. And again, thank you very much. And at least, please let people know about the Dr. Gil Levin's Martian Revelation Life Validation Campaign. Again, for craps and giggles, like the water thing. Let's just see what happens.
All right. Listen, I'm surrounded by people who study Mars. And 1 mile away, as Daryl knows, is the NASA Ames Research Center, and there are at least a dozen people over there who are studying Mars too. So Mars gets plenty of attention around here. You don't have to worry.
Oh, indeed. That's why I wanted it to be my attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Shostak. It was awesome having you on. You're an awesome guest. And again, I commend you for talking to people despite, the scientific realities of your minds of what you guys say and claim. And I don't mean that as an insult. And I think you know what I'm saying. Thank you very much and have a good night. And again, let's rock the future, my friend.
All righty. Thanks very much, Gary.
All right, Seth. Thank you. Good night. So, people, there you have it. Mr. Seth Shostak. Very interesting. And, a lot of roads I tried and wanted to go down, and it's very hard to bridge gaps. There's a big gap between what independent researchers see and what controlled mainstream scientists see, and what the scientific brightest minds in the nation see and or say. But you could always tell that between their words and between the lines, you could feel them. I don't know. I could just relate and understand his position. And that he's in, and how just things are the way they are. And I mean no insult to him, and I really don't. You people can, appreciate that, I'm sure. I'm just very concerned with how the future is going to be. But you know what? I'm very optimistic. And I do believe in the American voice, which we still have to use our rights. And we're going to use it to sign a White House petition because that's still our rights to do. That's trying to be taken away by globalists and corporations and Islamists and homo agendas and everything else to keep us down on the farm. And these Mars missions to be in the control of those who, like Mr. Shostak said, feel confident that they are working and studying on Mars. Well, so am I, and I want the bird's eye view that they got. I want to determine for myself by what I get to see or can be able to see, but we can't. Why? Because of the NASA budget defenders that control them. It's not necessarily the NASA scientists. Everyone's the bad guy. No one wants to claim about the face. No one wants to support Dr. Gil. And that still pisses me off. And I had to hold a lot of that in. But I cannot, kick someone's ass because, their God's not my God. Or they don't believe in Dr. Gil as I believe. And many of us do. Okay, but many of us are convinced enough that a petition needs to be underway, and only at L&M Radio Network have you even heard or seen any attempts to make such an effort underway, including those dark missioners over there. This one's for you. So all I'm gonna say is, look, the universe is filled, like Dr. Gill said, with life. It's universal. You know, it's panspermia there. Mr. Seth Shostak, it's out there, and I've read it from his article, remember? It's out there floating around. It don't have to just come from Mars or some other planetary body like he suggests. It's out there already in rocks. It comes to some place. For instance, this Earth helps seize the Earth because certain conditions are met and the rock busted open, whether the thing was dormant or dead or just happened to have some shrivelly up little potential survivors sucking in one little juice to thrive an entire planet. I don't know, but I do believe that the process of panspermia is a fact. Now, that still does not disprove a creator. It certainly disproves evolution. Okay, because evolution is ridiculous. My ancestors weren't born with tails between their legs. Okay, we're all different shades and colors. Why? For all I know, it could be because of the intelligence here that used to be in the past that built these pyramids. Maybe these so-called Martians that did the face and everything else and sculpted the entire surface of Mars before its cataclysms, like Dr. Brandenburg alludes to. I want to try and get him back on the show, possibly for the 28th. If Heather Wade does not show up, no offense to her. I know she's under a lot of struggle and everything, but I guarantee if she was on, she will be more than uplifted to come back kicking ass. Where? L&M Radio Network. I got everything planned out. Pictures, show, the music, everything. It's to tell about her life, to encourage her. But you know what? That's okay. We need to have Dr. Gill on with Dr. Brandenburg. Hopefully I can convince them to come on that night when the petition goes into force so we could talk more about this. And you all could hear from Dr. Gill's mouth instead of mine. Again, I may lack a lot of things, but at least I have the balls to come out here. And L&M Radio Network is the source of where this balls is being ballsed out from. Do you understand? And when you sign that petition, it's your voice, you're the people, and you're the Martian militia at that point, where we can indeed demand the NASA scientists, because the NASA budget offenders are the ones that's going to be demanded by the President of the United States, my President, Thug Trump, as well as Vice President Pence, the National Space Council chairman. They will order them to order NASA to put these tests on. You don't think we could do it? It's been done before to take pictures of Cydonia, Mars Observer, Mars Global Surveyor. I mean, come on. Nothing's impossible, and it's going to take us to make the Martian revelation and to survive what once we almost didn't. Everything's changed now. This is the turning point. Think I'm crazy. Call me Mad Martian. Call me whatever you will. All right? But I know one thing. My name's going to go down in the future with my legacy as part of the United States of America and the Space Force Commander. I know that sounds nuts, doesn't it? And it would, except for those down through time monitoring this show. On that note, I want to let you all know, and especially my unmentionable friend there, Mr. Hoagland, I'm fully alive, just like Mars.